Bleach. Studying medicine can't save the spirit world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 326. Desperate flash flood. Boom boom boom. Just as the Central 46th Chamber in Soul Society was hesitating whether to increase the combat power of the Expeditionary Army and launch an annihilation war against the Hollows, assessing the possible risks to Soul Society, a rolling group of Uchike's Hollows, led by a seemingly endless group of Killian Hollows, began to spread towards the direction of the Expeditionary Army camp. Mundo. In the past definition, the main focus of Soul Society was undoubtedly on the surface desert, because that is the area where the Great Hollows above the level of Uchike's life, fight and evolve. And the Great Hollow Forest deep below the desert, although more than 95% of the Hollows of Mundo life, they are basically Killian level and ordinary Hollows that pose no threat to the Seireitei. The Great Hollow Forest, in the past concept of the Central 46th Chamber, it was just a place to maintain the balance of souls between Mundo and Soul Society and to accommodate a large number of Hollows. However, during the more than 50 years that Synopsis occupied the Great Hollow Forest for development, he constantly promoted and absorbed a large number of new Uchikes, and invisibly established a pyramid-like ruling order. Synopsis maintained the survival of all Uchikes with the ability of false limbs, and Uchikes controlled a large number of Killians to devour each other and evolve new Uchikes, and the new Uchikes were absorbed by Synopsis to evolve themselves, and were devoured by Synopsis to maintain their huge giant Buddha body. In this unique way, Synopsis intervened in the balance between the different levels of Hollows in the original Mundo, and in the absence of internal friction within the Uchikes group, the result was that the number of Uchikes ushered in an explosive growth, although in the popular concept, the Uchikes that are comparable to the captain level are all normal Uchikes level Hollows, and the Uchikes that have been castrated by Synopsis in this unique way are only the most basic Uchikes. But even a basic Uchikes has combat power and spiritual pressure that often exceeds the level of a vice captain. And with more than 600 Uchikes leading the endless Jillians from the Great Hollow Forest, the result is, sensed a huge amount of spiritual pressure reaction. Target, camp. Enemy attack. Enemy attack. Enemy attack. After the huge group of Hollows approached the Expeditionary Core camp for a certain distance, the perception-type ghost barrier built with the Expeditionary Core camp as the center reacted almost instantly. The ghost god of death responsible for maintaining the ghost barrier, sensing the dense and boundless number of Great Hollows, their expressions were almost completely stagnant. The warning from the ghost barrier also put the entire Expeditionary Core camp into an emergency combat state. The death gods quickly assembled according to the schedule and arrived at their respective waiting areas. The highest level of enemy attack warning. Aiden Sosok, who was in the Expeditionary Core camp at the moment, walked out of the tent somewhat unexpectedly, and subconsciously looked towards the tent where Senju Cheng lived not far away. Senbon Bancho also walked out of the tent at the right time. However, after Senju Cheng came out of the tent, Neo, who had an icy and indifferent face, also came out. Aiden Sosok pushed his glasses, but he couldn't wait for the tacit look from Senju Cheng as usual. This made Aiden Sosok feel a little strange, and he spoke. Makao-kun, Vice Captain is, enemy attack warning, get ready. Then, Aiden Sosok, as the commander of the Expeditionary Corps, quickly rushed to the front of the camp. Soon, the spiritual pressure of Uchikes appeared in the sensing range of the Shinigami. No, perhaps, there was no need to sense it at all. Just the naked eye could clearly see the endless black line that appeared from the far distance of the desert. The number of Uchikes far exceeded the common sense of all the Shinigami, as if there was an endless black wave of Killian. Are you kidding? How can there be so many Hollows? No, someone tell me why I can sense so many Uchikes spiritual pressure. It's impossible to win. The number of Uchikes alone is close to the number of Shinigami in the entire expedition, right? You have to run away. It's impossible to win. Almost in an instant, after witnessing the huge wave of Hollows, the morale of the entire expedition was close to the point of collapse. Although the Shinigami who were able to participate in the expedition were absolutely elite, most of them had the combat power to kill a Hollow of the Killian level alone. But, Uchikes, that is undoubtedly far beyond the scope of what ordinary Shinigami can handle in a one-on-one fight. Even in Soul Society, once a large Hollow of Uchike's level attacks, it is often taken seriously and needs to dispatch Captain level Shinigami to deal with it. However, what appeared in front of the Expeditionary Corps was not one or two, or even a group of 10 of Cheng-ge's, but a terrifying group of hollows that exceeded 600 just by visual estimation. And looking at the entire GOTY 13, let alone finding 600 captains, there are not even 600 officers. It is enough to show how desperate the Shinigami of the Expeditionary Corps felt under the impact of this terrifying number of hollows. Even when Aizen Sosok's eyes swept over those hollows, his eyebrows unconsciously frowned slightly. And the next moment, almost without waiting for the Expeditionary Corps to react at all, the chaotic and independent Cheng-ge's in the minds of the Shinigami suddenly began to condense hollow flash from a distance. Even the countless Killians following behind the Cheng-ge's opened their mouths, and red flashes began to gather. For a moment, in the seemingly independent world of black and white in Hukou Mundo, countless red flashes shone like stars, and then shone brightly. At the same time, countless flashes intertwined and crossed the night sky, flooding the entire Expeditionary Corps camp with red destructive light. Boom. The ghost barrier that the Expeditionary Corps had placed high hopes on in the past was almost instantly annihilated in the rolling flood of flashes. At this moment, countless death gods stared at the overwhelming red flashes, their pupils shrank, and they could not react at all. No, or rather, reacting to this flood of flashes launched by countless large hollows, is meaningless. Chapter 327. What do you lack? What do you desire? Boom. At that moment, even though many Shinigami instinctively used the binding technique or the zanpakutō Shikai defensor, the hollow flash flood swept through, and it was almost as if the entire Expeditionary Corps camp was flattened. When the aftermath of the hollow flash flood gradually dissipated, the entire Expeditionary Corps camp, which was originally neat and orderly, seemed to have been wiped out for the most part. At the station of the rescue team, in the eyes of the rescue team members who still had terrified eyes, the huge trees that they were protecting slowly dispersed around them. The next moment, what came into view was that the familiar camp was still in ruins, and the number of spiritual pressure of the elite Shinigami of the entire Expeditionary Corps was instantly reduced by half. In addition, there were a large number of wounded people wailing in pain. Standing next to Senbon Bancho, Yamada Hanatem looked at everything in front of him with a look of fear and trepidation, subconsciously reaching out to grab the corner of Senbon Bancho's clothes, and said tremblingly, "Vice Captain Senju, what should we do? What else can we do?" "Do what we should do," Senbon Bancho replied. What? Not retreating?" Yamada Hanatem asked subconsciously. "Retreat?" Senbon Bancho turned his head towards the black cavity passage that was supposed to be protected by the ghost path, but it was completely wiped out. Obviously, these hollows are not without wisdom. On the contrary, they have an order that is far beyond the cognition of Soul Society. The hollow flash flood they just launched was aimed at the black cavity that could allow the Expeditionary Corps to withdraw to Soul Society from the beginning. Unlike the gates used by Soul Society that can accurately lead to the real world, it is not easy for the 12th Division to accurately open the black cavity passage leading to the Expeditionary Corps now. After Yamada Hanatem followed Senbon Bancho's gaze, he also understood this common sense in an instant. Yamada Hanatem, whose face turned pale, also completely understood that the Expeditionary Corps had no way out in a short time. "So, we can only wait to die?" Yamada Hanatem sat down directly on the desert powerlessly, his face pale and desperate. Senbon Bancho was so excited that he subconsciously licked his lips. "I've been waiting for so long, and it's great to use Master Cheng-ge's body to fight to my heart's content." However, Senbon Bancho felt his heart suddenly twitch, and instantly reacted to pay attention to Master Cheng-ge's image, and raised his zanpakutō and said loudly, "It's not waiting to die, but fighting." The next moment, Senbon Bancho took a step and took the initiative towards the almost completely destroyed camp. In a gentle and somewhat tragic and passionate voice, he ordered without looking back, "You stay behind and do everything you can. Although it may be a bit reluctant, I will do everything I can to protect you before I fall." Finally, Senbon Bancho felt that what he said seemed to reveal his eagerness to fight, which was contrary to Master Cheng-ge's personality characteristics, so he did not forget to add loudly, "In the name of the Doctor." For a moment, in the eyes of the Shinigami of the rescue team, the distant hollow wave was rapidly rushing towards the camp, and the vice captain they admired and respected was going upstream for them. The back figure inexplicably became taller, in the name of the Doctor. Under the image and prestige accumulated by Senju Cheng for more than 50 years, and the influence of Senbon Bancho, some doctors with good combat power drew their zanpakutō on the spot and followed Senbon Bancho's pace. and some doctors with weak combat power, led by Hanataeum, tremblingly carried the emergency medical kits on their backs and went to the wounded around them. Bankai. Mori no Kabatsu. The next moment, the surrounding desert seemed to turn into an oasis in an instant, and among the countless giant trees that were madly intertwined and spread, a nearly 1,000-meter-high wooden giant Buddha stood in front of the Expeditionary Corps camp. At the same time, Senju Cheng knew about the attack on the Expeditionary camp as soon as it happened. However, after meeting up with Terrible and learning about the changes that happened to Synopsis, Senju Cheng knew that it was most likely Seireitei who was manipulating the hollows. Although Senju Cheng was shocked that Synopsis, who had been let go more than 50 years ago, had developed to this extent. But with the combination of intelligence from all aspects, Senju Cheng could not help but accept this fact. However, what made Senju Cheng quite helpless was that Synopsis, the fate-compassionate old man, had been hiding for more than 50 years, but he didn't even know that Seireitei had left a back door for him to enter and exit at any time. However, whether it was a response to Synopsis' loyalty or to solve the trouble of Seireitei, Senju Cheng could only quickly go to the location where Synopsis was. Soon, Senju Cheng found the golden giant Buddha in the black and white Mundo, lying across the desert. From a distance, it looked like a mountain range with no visible edge. Senju Cheng. Even though Senju Cheng had a premonition from Haribo's description, he was still stunned. A giant. This was undoubtedly a giant that Senju Cheng had never seen before. Could it be that Synopsis, this guy, created such a giant because his body was very small and he was madly craving for whatever he lacked? Senju Cheng muttered. Compared with Young Mai, one of the 10 blades in the original trajectory, whose body could continue to grow with anger, Young Mai would probably not be able to reach this size even if he was perceived by countless hyenas and was unable to rage for hundreds of years. How to deal with this giant? Senju Cheng turned his head and glanced at Terrible, signaling Terrible, who was afraid that he might have exceeded his ability, to stay where he was and prepare for the response. He then moved towards the giant Buddha that seemed to be sleeping on the desert. However, just when Senju Cheng approached a certain distance, the giant Buddha's eyes suddenly opened, and the movement of its huge body caused the entire desert to shake. Cheng. The crazy and arrogant voice of Seireitei sounded from the huge body of the giant Buddha. Originally, I was still thinking about where to find you, a guy who has mastered the ability of Seireitei, but I didn't expect you to take the initiative to deliver yourself to my door. Senju Cheng raised his head almost 90 degrees and looked up, confirming. Seireitei. Then, the voice of Seireitei echoed in the desert. That's right, the one in front of you now is a life that is infinitely close to perfect, the future king of Mundo, who is about to destroy Soul Society and eliminate all the Shinigami. Seireitei. Submit to me and hand over the Seireitei technique you have mastered. Cheng. Chapter 328. Physician's Sword. At this moment, controlling the unprecedented huge body of Vastod and Mundo, Seireitei felt that he was almost a god representing perfect life. Reaching out his hand, it seemed as if he could hold the moon, and looking down at everything in the world, everything seemed as small as an ant. This made Seireitei's already crazy heart almost explode and overflow, and his ambition grew unstoppably. Mundo. No, he who controlled the huge group of hollows in the Great Hollow Forest undoubtedly had the ability to conquer the Soul Society as well. Listening to Seireitei's speech, Senju Cheng already understood that there was probably no point in continuing to negotiate with Seireitei. Such madness and arrogance could not be moved by simple words. Then, in the thought of Senju Cheng, countless huge dead trees in the Great Hollow Forest rose from the ground with Senju Cheng as the center. Boom boom boom, the terrain was changed almost unbelievably quickly, and a forest of dead trees that was larger than the group of hollows that once surrounded the Kainyaku Palace was completely formed in just a few breaths. However, Seireitei, who had secretly witnessed the ability of Senju Cheng, did not change his expression at all. In Seireitei's view, this huge forest of dead trees that was not even as tall as his waist was just a toy that could be destroyed with a wave of his hand. Trying to resist? Cheng, do you think you can trap me with just these dead trees? Seireitei mocked arrogantly. In response to Seireitei, the dead trees spread and entangled towards the giant Buddha. At that moment, the entire forest of dead trees was like a large net covering the entire desert, trying to entangle the giant Buddha in it. However, it was like an ant that was magnified hundreds of thousands of times, and the power it could explode was a terrifying degree that could not be measured normally. The giant Buddha, which was almost completely equivalent to the body of Vastop, also swept across the entire forest of dead trees in front of him with a wave of his hand. Crack, crack, snap, snap, a series of tense cracking sounds rang out, and the giant Buddha's palm swept across the place, and countless dead trees were cut off instantly. Even with the aftermath alone, a storm was set off in the entire desert. For a moment, Senju Cheng, who clearly witnessed this scene, subconsciously emerged in his mind a certain picture. In the movie Journey to the West, conquering the demons, Sun Wukong was covered by Tatagator's almost edgeless slab. Perhaps, in the entire Hukou Mundo, except for Bilegum's decay ability that is close to a certain rule, which can pose a threat to the giant Buddha, even Stark's Infinite Void Flash can't do anything to the giant Buddha. As for the form of passing through the Deadwood Forest, after the preliminary confirmation just now, Senju Cheng already understood that it would be impossible to do it unless the giant Buddha was completely exhausted. However, whether it was the situation of Synopsis or the situation of the Expeditionary Corps, there was no way to give Senju Cheng such a long time. It seems that there is only one way. Senju Cheng sighed helplessly, and then slowly pulled out the zanpakutō from his waist. However, this scene was undoubtedly ridiculous to the extreme in the eyes of Seireitei, and he even laughed subconsciously. No way. No way. Ashwayunchen, you don't think you can hurt me with something that is as small as an embroidery needle to me? Seireitei laughed and took the initiative to slap Senju Cheng in front of him, saying sarcastically, I'm afraid that even if I don't move and let you stab me, the tiny embroidery needle can only barely pierce my skin, right? Embroidery needle. Senju Cheng's eyes seemed to look meaningful, and then said, in fact, a more accurate way to describe it should be a scalpel. The next moment, as Senju Cheng's voice fell, the whole person turned into a shadow and went towards the palm in front of him, and the zanpakutō swung directly at the wrist that was almost as big as the waist of an ordinary Killian. Moreover, in the eyes of Makoto Senju, the world in front of him is almost presented from the microscopic perspective of the spirit particles. For Makoto Senju, the world has never been simply microscopic. In the eyes of Makoto Senju, the density between different spirit particles, the gaps between different spirit particle structures, and the hardness of different spirit particle organizations are always so clear. In the past, Makoto Senju had never tried to apply this ability to combat, but Makoto Senju's kendo level did not allow him to accurately dissect everything in combat like holding a scalpel. Until, nearly 50 years of uninterrupted kendo sparring with Unohana Retsu, Makoto Senju's hand holding the zanpakutō became more and more stable, even more stable than holding a scalpel. However, Makoto Senju needs to maintain a fairly rational kendo ability to use this ability, and Makoto Senju will not try to use this ability to decompose the beloved Unohana teacher while maintaining rationality. Therefore, Unohana Retsu is not aware of the sword art that Makoto Senju is really good at under his rationality. This was also that first time that Makoto Senju really used this sword art named Doctor by the kind-hearted Makoto Senju. The moment when Makoto Senju crossed the wrists of the giant Buddha, the crazy smile on the giant Buddha's face suddenly stagnated. A clear bloodline suddenly appeared at the wrist, puff. The next moment, a large amount of blood spurted out, and the wrist, which was almost as big as Killian's waist, was broken with a smooth hot surface. Seireitei, who was controlling the body of the giant Buddha, could not feel the pain, but the giant Buddha's wide-open eyes completely revealed Seireitei's shock. How is it possible? How is it possible to do such a thing? This is a huge body comparable to Vastop, how could such a tiny blade cut it off so easily? This is absolutely impossible, this body is already a nearly perfect weapon. Facing Seireitei's exclamation, Senju Cheng was about to say something, but his eyes were completely focused on the giant hand that was broken on the ground. Then, for the first time, an irrepressible look of ecstasy and greed appeared in Senju Cheng's eyes, and an unconscious big smile appeared on his face. What? So the false limb exists in this form? Synopsis, this great gift really surprises me. Senju Cheng stared at the giant hand that was broken on the ground. No, perhaps it would be more accurate to say that he was staring at the spiritual power that was constantly escaping from the broken giant hand. Chapter 329 The opportunity to complete the ultimate spirit. Spirit particle control is the real name of Senju Cheng's zanpakutō ability, and it is also the essence of the ability. However, Senju Cheng cannot directly control the spirit particles that constitute other people's spirits, otherwise Senju Cheng would be able to decompose other spirits in a single thought, and there would be no need to learn any combat skills. Similarly, Senju Cheng's absorption of spiritual power in the past also had this invisible limitation, and he could not directly absorb the spiritual power inside other spirits. The scattered spiritual power absorbed by the forest seed is, in a sense, the spiritual power abandoned by the original spirit. Among them, it is as if there is a certain concept that restricts it. Similar to Senju Cheng's situation, there is also young Michika's zanpakutō, glass peacock. Although the zanpakutō, glass peacock, can forcibly absorb the spiritual power of others, the spiritual power absorbed cannot be used by young Michika at all, and can only be discharged and consumed in the form of blooming petals. However, at this moment, the broken giant palm in front of Senju Cheng is emitting a huge amount of spiritual power, and some of the spiritual power is completely absorbed by Senju Cheng. In just a moment, Senju Cheng understood the reason. Normally, even if the spirit dissipates, it will only return to the essence of the spirit particle, but these spirits created by Synopsis' false limb ability are an exception. From the beginning, these spirits were created and maintained by Synopsis through spiritual power, and their essence is spiritual power. Between the cycles, it was as if some kind of bug was stuck, causing this part of the spiritual power to lose a certain sense of belonging. The next moment, a large piece of dead wood extended from Senju Cheng's feet and racked up the broken giant palm. And the spirit particles that constituted the giant palm quickly dissipated and recovered into spiritual power without the support of the false limb ability, and were madly absorbed by the dead wood and transferred to Senju Cheng's body. Although Senju Cheng was absorbing a large amount of spirit particles every moment, he felt a sense of being filled for the first time, too much at one time. However, when Senju Cheng looked at the giant Buddha, what he revealed was undoubtedly a deep dissatisfaction. Originally, Senju Cheng still had a long way to go before he could reach the spiritual power required to completely complete the transformation into the ultimate spirit body, but the giant Buddha in front of him had undoubtedly become an opportunity for Senju Cheng to complete the transformation into the ultimate spirit body in a short period of time. In the eyes of Seireitei, it was as if the broken giant palm had been swallowed by and Chim with some ability, and the target was aimed at Seireitei. And, stop it. Under madness, anger, and vague fear, Seireitei shouted angrily, and the other giant palm slammed down at the ant-sized Senju Cheng with the momentum of destroying everything. At this moment, the wind and clouds surged. Before the giant palm fell, the wind pressure it raised swept countless sands wildly. Senju Cheng raised the zanpakutō in his hand, just like a scalpel waiting for the patient to come to the door, and even had a few gentle smiles on his face. Boom. Finally, the giant palm fell, and the whole desert trembled. However, before the giant Buddha could smile, a bloodline suddenly appeared in the center of the giant palm that fell in the forest of dead trees. The next moment, a piece of the giant palm broke off smoothly, and then a large amount of dead trees spread out, as if it was a bloody mouth that couldn't wait to open, and instantly wrapped up the broken palm. As for Senju Cheng, under the attack that could easily smash if stopped, the whole person looked unharmed. It was not until this moment that Seireitei truly confirmed the fact. Cheng was much more terrifying than he had imagined, and he was going to devour this body. What a joke, Seireitei said subconsciously, and the arm of the broken palm swung, and the body that was originally sitting cross-legged instinctively wanted to stand up and escape. However, when Seireitei looked down, he found that the dead woods that seemed to pose no threat before were intertwined and entangled between the legs of the giant Buddha without his knowledge, like layers of shackles that held the giant Buddha firmly in place. You are just reacting now and preparing to escape. Isn't that too arrogant? Senju Cheng said with a smile while feeling the fullness of a large amount of spiritual power infused. Don't try to escape, okay? If you run away and consume a lot of spiritual power in the giant Buddha's body, it will cause very serious damage to me. However, how could Seireitei really accept his fate? With both giant palms almost useless, he tried to tear off the large amount of dead wood that bound his legs with just his arms. A large amount of dead wood was broken into pieces with an unimaginable burst of brute force, although under the control of Senju Cheng, a large amount of huge dead wood was constantly produced to maintain the binding effect. The legs of the giant Buddha were gradually raised, which also ignited hope in Seireitei's heart. For Seireitei, this giant Buddha's body is undoubtedly the perfect weapon to conquer Mundo and even Soul Society. How could he allow it to be devoured by Cheng in this way? The next moment, the struggling giant Buddha stepped heavily on the desert with one foot, and the entire huge body was about to stand up. The after-image transformed by Senju Cheng suddenly appeared at the ankle of that foot, and the zanpakutō in his hand passed along the spirit gap that was difficult to distinguish with the normal naked eye. Puff. Compared with the wrist, the ankle supporting the entire body of the giant Buddha is undoubtedly larger. Therefore, under Senju Cheng's attack, the ankle did not break completely, but only a big hole appeared, but the tendons in it were completely cut off by Senju Cheng. This caused the giant Buddha's huge body to fall heavily on the desert due to the cut tendons and imbalance. The next moment, more overwhelming endless dead trees rushed towards the giant Buddha from all directions, tightly entangled and bound every part of the giant Buddha's body. At this moment, Seireitei inexplicably hit some kind of illusion. He seemed to be the experimental subject that he had tied up in the past and was waiting to be cut open bit by bit for research. Apart from desperately waiting to be cut open bit by bit, any struggle would be exchanged for the other party's crazy and happy smile. But even so, Seireitei still subconsciously controlled the giant Buddha to struggle. In response, Senju Cheng spoke to comfort him in a gentle and pleasant tone. "I've told you, please don't move, it will make me very distressed. Next, please lie down and I will do it myself." Chapter 330. Changes in Ratsu. Don't move. It's impossible to make Seireitei stay still. Instead, he struggled harder and harder. From a distance, it looked like a mountain in the desert, rolling and shaking violently, trying to get rid of the countless dead trees entwined and intertwined on it. Earthquake. This was no different from an unprecedented earthquake in Hukomundo, and countless sand weights were shaken up. As Vastode, Parable, who witnessed the whole process, was shocked. Is this really the combat power that Vastode can have? The aftermath of the battle alone had caused a large-scale change in the terrain of the desert, and while the giant Buddha controlled by Seireitei was struggling, a huge deep pit was gradually forming at its location. Although countless sand was flowing back, the deep pit was still expanding, but the resistance of the incredibly huge giant Buddha seemed to be getting weaker and weaker, as if it was about to be completely swallowed up. In fact, it was just as Haribal guessed. Senju Cheng was dismembering the huge Buddha in the true sense, just like treating a corpse in a funeral home, dismembering it along the defects of the spirit body. Of course, due to the speed of Senju Cheng's absorption of spiritual power, Senju Cheng also intentionally controlled the speed of dismemberment to reduce the unnecessary waste of spiritual power that was not absorbed in time. As for all the resistance made by the giant Buddha, after both palms were cut off and all the joints were cut off, it was meaningless. If Synopsis, who controlled the body of the giant Buddha, could continue to use false limbs to repair the injuries in a way that was similar to super speed regeneration, then Senju Cheng might find it quite difficult. Unfortunately, it was obvious that Seireitei had not really completely controlled Synopsis, and all he could do is to control the body of the giant Buddha. Under Senju Cheng's almost plundering method, the spiritual power accumulated in his body was undoubtedly growing at an unimaginable speed. The spiritual power formed by the vast top-level Great Hollow, which was equivalent to the size of a continuous mountain range, was constantly absorbed by Senju Cheng. This also means that the critical point of spiritual power that can complete the subsequent ultimate spiritual body transformation in one go in Senju Cheng's imagination is approaching rapidly. However, absorbing such a huge amount of spiritual power at one time also makes it increasingly difficult for Senju Cheng to control the spiritual pressure that is leaking out. The unimaginable huge spiritual pressure makes Haribal, who is not far from Senju Cheng, feel as if the night sky of Hukomundo is collapsing and pressing on him bit by bit. Surrender. Although Haribal is a vast old-level Great Hollow of the highest level in Hukomundo, facing the spiritual pressure that is almost beyond imagination, he actually has an unmatched sense of surrender. The scope of the spiritual pressure is still expanding. In the farther direction, a considerable number of hollows are almost directly disintegrated under the pressure of this spiritual pressure. Even, at this moment, the Expeditionary Corps camp has become an extremely cruel and bloody battlefield. Facing the siege of a group of hollows that was far beyond imagination, a large number of surviving Shinigami who had experienced the first round of hollow flashes continued to fight bloody battles under the leadership of their direct officers. The 4 captains and vice-captains of the Shinigami, led by Aizen Sosuk, Senju Cheng, Suzuki Chojiro, and Izaneo, stood at the front line. Among them, the wooden giant Buddha incarnated by Senju Cheng, who released his Bankai at the first time, was like a wall that countless hollows could hardly cross, and almost directly withstood the impact pressure of nearly 90% of the hollows. Boom boom boom. On the chaotic battlefield, the giant palm Buddha wheel behind the wooden giant Buddha kept turning, and countless wooden giant palms blasted away like a storm. But, the number of hollows was undoubtedly too many, although each palm of the wooden giant Buddha was enough to crush a killer into powder. Even if your case took a direct hit, it might be smashed. However, the huge size of the wooden giant Buddha formed by Bankai Mori no Kabata also made it the target of many hollows in the middle and rear. The wooden giant Buddha was bombarded with more than 20 kinds of hollows almost every breath, and a large amount of sawdust flew across the battlefield along with the flesh and blood of the hollows. Moreover, there were even quite a few Cheng-ge who chose to cling directly to the wooden giant Buddha, frantically releasing various attacks to try to destroy the wooden giant Buddha itself. But even so, the wooden giant Buddha still stood firm, for a moment, let alone the other ordinary death gods. Even Izaneo, whose expression seemed to be so indifferent and calm, felt the tragic atmosphere and couldn't help but recall the rumor about the statement of Senju Cheng when he introduced this Bankai. Bankai Mori no Kabata is the ultimate form of Shinra, sitting cross-legged on the 10,000 forests is to suppress everything. Even when treatment is no longer able to save the situation, completely abandoning one's own flexibility and treatment ability in exchange for a strong offensive and defensive form, this represents the doctor's final tragic song and will. Even though Aizen Sasuke and Suzuchojiro have both released their Bankai on the surface, the one who truly supports the entire expeditionary corps is undoubtedly Senju Cheng, who is still fighting a desperate battle with the attack of 100 hollows. Kill, how can you let the deputy captain of the treatment squad, Senju, underestimate the will and faith of the combat squad, you bastard hollow, stay away from the body of the deputy captain Senju's Bankai, the 33th of the path, the blue fire falling. Don't retreat, hold your zanpakutō tightly and look directly at the enemy. And the real manipulator of the wooden giant Buddha, Shinra listened to the excited words of the large number of death gods who were fighting around the wooden giant Buddha, and the whole person was getting more and more excited. Suddenly, Shinra eyes subconsciously looked in a certain direction. A terrifyingly large spiritual pressure was vaguely sensed. Although the feeling of the spiritual pressure was quite unfamiliar to Shinra and was similar to the spiritual pressure of vast old, Shinra reacted immediately. Is this the spiritual pressure of Master Cheng-ge? What? Has Master Cheng-ge reached that step? That's great, Master Cheng-ge. Although the Rin family was a little reluctant, they finally reached this step. In addition to Shinra Aizen Sasuke, who seemed to be solemn and giving his all, also paused, looked in the same direction of Shinra and muttered. The spiritual pressure of Cheng. Chapter 331. Request from Cheng-ge. Cheng's spiritual pressure. Why did it appear in that direction? And, the spiritual pressure is so huge. Aizen Sasuke narrowed his eyes, hesitated for a moment, and suddenly had the idea of quietly leaving this side of the battlefield to confirm the situation in person. The huge spiritual pressure undoubtedly made Aizen Sasuke extremely concerned. In contrast, even if the expeditionary corps was completely destroyed by these sudden attacks of the hollows, it didn't matter if some of Aizen Sasuke's original plans were affected. And Aizen Sasuke's movements were also clearly seen by Shinra who was immune to the ability of zanpakutō switchetsu. Suddenly, Shinra felt that the heart in his spirit body suddenly beat faster several times, and then the voice of Senju Cheng faintly came into Shinra ears. Find a way to stop Aizen, don't let him come over, Master Cheng-ge. Suddenly, hearing Senju Cheng's voice, Shinra was obviously a little panicked. So, Master Cheng-ge has always been able to hear what the Rin family secretly complained about him. It's over. And Senju Cheng's slightly hurried voice continued to sound. Don't be stunned, the situation here is temporarily unable to separate, I must find a way to hold Aizen Sasuke. What should I do? But before Shinra finished asking, Shinra voice seemed to be completely interrupted. This made Shinra confused, and then his eyes turned and found that Aizen Sasuke seemed to have begun to prepare to use zanpakutō switchetsu to try to get away. In an emergency, Shinra imitated Senju Cheng's tone and subconsciously shouted in the direction of Aizen Sasuke. Aizen-kun, help me. Instantly, Aizen Sasuke paused, and turned his head to look at Senbon Bancho with an incredible look. This request was almost like thunder in Aizen Sasuke's ears. Makoto-kun, actually took the initiative to ask for help from him. Although Aizen Sasuke has always regarded Senju Cheng as a person who can truly understand him, and a fellow traveler who stands at the same level as him. However, Aiden Sosok also knows that Senju Cheng has been on guard and even hostile to him in the past, and he does not understand how precious it is to have an existence that is truly equal to him. Without a trace of hesitation, although Aiden Sosok was extremely confused and wary of Ashwin and Cheng's abrupt spiritual pressure, those things were obviously insignificant when Macao-kun took the initiative to invite him. As you wish, Macao. Aiden Sosok pushed his glasses and approached the wooden giant Buddha in an instant. He raised his hand and abandoned the chanting to release the 81st binding way, broken sky to block nearly 10 virtual flashes. Even among the captains, this was still an exaggerated attainment in the way of the ghost, which made some Shinigami look at Aiden Sosok with a slight change in confusion, as if to say, "No way. Captain Aiden, is it that our survival affects your ability in the way of the ghost?" Instead, it was Vice Captain Senju who shouted that you could abandon the chanting and release the broken sky. However, facing the puzzled eyes of some Shinigami, Aiden Sosok raised a slightly disapproving smile at the corner of his mouth. In Aiden Sosok's view, the value and importance of the Expeditionary Corps are obviously not enough for Aiden Sosok to take the risk and trouble caused by his full strength. However, the first sincere request from a friend was enough. As for the risk, Aiden Sosok was ready to secretly kill any Shinigami with doubtful eyes without them knowing it. And now that Aiden Sosok had been successfully held back, Senju Cheng, who was standing on the head of the wooden giant Buddha, was undoubtedly relieved. It seems that Aiden Sosok, whom my master is so afraid of every day, is not as difficult to deal with as imagined, Senju Cheng thought secretly, and inadvertently showed Aiden Sosok a sincere smile as if he were a friend, and said, "Thank you, Aiden-kun." Aiden Sosok could tell whether a smile was truly from the heart at a glance. The sincere smile from Senju Cheng that seemed to contain recognition and gratitude inexplicably made Aiden Sosok feel more excited. At this moment, facing this sudden strange feeling in his heart, Aiden Sosok couldn't help but wonder if this was the feeling of himself standing alone for countless years on a high place, and the distance between him and his companions was really close, and they were finally beginning to understand each other. Is it the feeling? With the assistance of Aiden Sosok, there is no doubt that the pressure on Senju Cheng from the impact of the group of hollows has been reduced a lot. The power that had to be used to repair the wooden giant Buddha quickly at all times was used to launch a more fierce attack. For a time, countless giant palms were almost like a meteor shower, bombarding the group of hollows in front continuously. Faintly, the wooden giant Buddha, which seemed to be in danger under the impact of the group of hollows, gradually had a reversal trend, which also raised the morale of the entire Expeditionary Corps. And at this moment, Senju Cheng, who was filled with a huge amount of spiritual power, had no extra energy to stop Senju Cheng's actions after roughly confirming the situation of Senju Cheng. Spiritual power, too much. Even if Senju Cheng used the completed ultimate spirit body to accommodate a large amount of spiritual power, when the spiritual power reached a certain level, the spiritual pressure alone would put great pressure on the organs in Senju Cheng's body. This situation was somewhat similar to what Kyoichi Stark had experienced before, because the spiritual pressure was too strong, causing the other hollows to be directly annihilated if they were too close. Now, it was Senju Cheng's own organs that could no longer withstand the terrifying spiritual pressure. If Senju Cheng had not been frantically repairing a large number of organs in his body with spiritual control all the time, I'm afraid those organs would have melted themselves under the terrifying spiritual pressure. At this moment, Senju Cheng was already in a huge pit between the Great Hollow Forest and the surface desert geology. The originally huge body of the giant Buddha was swallowed by Senju Cheng and only a head was left. We can't wait any longer, but before that, we must completely eliminate the hidden danger of Seireitei. Senju Cheng turned his eyes and swung his zanpakutō. Under the support of the huge spiritual pressure, he easily split the head directly. However, what appeared in front of Senju Cheng was only Synopsis, who was hidden deep in the head and whose body shape was quite similar to human. Chapter 332, Norton 1. After Synopsis evolved into a vast top-level hollow, he obviously got rid of his former insect appearance, and the whole person was quite similar to the appearance of a human boy. However, Seireitei was nowhere to be seen. Abandon this body and escape, Senju Cheng murmured as he approached Synopsis, and his voice suddenly changed. You'd probably want me to think so? Seireitei, even for this reason, completely gave up the control of the giant Buddha's body long in advance. Just as Senju Cheng's voice fell, the zanpakutō in Senju Cheng's hand pierced Synopsis' abdomen and directly penetrated Synopsis completely. The next moment, as Senju Cheng pulled out his zanpakutō, a pink round egg-like thing pierced through the blade. What a pity, Seireitei. Anything that exists in the form of spirit particles will not have any secrets in front of my eyes. The spirit particles belonging to you and Synopsis' own spirit particles are clearly distinguished in my eyes. In fact, this was not the first time Seireitei resisted. As early as when Senju Cheng was constantly absorbing the spiritual power of the giant Buddha's body. Seireitei tried to hide some special things in it, trying to take the opportunity to enter Senju Cheng's body by being swallowed. Unfortunately, the essence of what Senju Cheng absorbed was spiritual power, and it was impossible to directly integrate it into Seireitei's part. On the contrary, this made Senju Cheng completely remember the characteristics of Seireitei's spirit particles. Farewell. As Senju Cheng's last voice sounded, the pink round head pierced by the zanpakutō quickly turned into spirit particles and dissipated. Then, Senju Cheng roughly checked Synopsis, who was still in a coma, and then began to absorb the last part of the giant Buddha's body. This also made Senju Cheng completely filled up for the first time in the true sense, and even to the point where he could not control it and was about to overflow. Immediately, Senju Cheng did not even bother to say hello to Hilibel, and controlled a large number of dead trees to wrap himself up, and then quickly sank deeper into the geology, and directly began to take the last step towards the complete ultimate spiritual body. This time, it was completely different from the past slow transformation of the skin, bones, tendons, flesh, etc. of the spiritual body. Instead, all the organs and brain in the body were transformed at one time, allowing the spiritual body to cross the last half of the distance at once and directly achieve 100% of the ultimate spiritual body. And Naught and One are often the most wonderful existence. Naught and One seem to be one step apart, but in fact there are countless distances and numbers between them. It was just like when Senju Cheng initially carried out the ultimate spiritual body transformation, thus achieving the breakthrough of Naught and possessing the ability of spiritual control. And One is, at the same time, in the Expeditionary Corps camp. Although with the help of Aizen Sosok, Senbon fought to his heart's content, the number of casualties among the other Shinigami was inevitably rising rapidly. With this trend, it will not be long before there are only a few survivors in the entire expeditionary camp except Senbon and Aizen Sosok. The terrifying number of hollows has almost completely covered the entire expeditionary camp, and even Yamada Hanatame, who is not good at quarreling, has to tremble and draw his zanpakutō to fight. At this moment of almost despair, a black cavity suddenly appeared above the expeditionary camp, and powerful Shinigami spiritual pressure came out from it. Soifong, Kachikibyakuya, Komamura Sajin, Shiba Ishin, Zaraka Kenpachi, Kurasuchi Mayuri. As the figures of 6 captain-level Shinigami appeared first, the expeditionary Shinigami who were still fighting bloody couldn't help but shout out loud. And following behind the 6 captains, there were also a large number of vice-captains, chief officers, and elite Shinigami of the GOTY 13. Seeing the appearance of many captains, Aizen Sosok pushed his glasses and realized that this attack from the hollows was about to come to an end. Although the number of Ichikais in the hollows was unprecedented, they were only the most basic Ichikais after all, and a small number of them had been killed by Makoto's Bankai. In the absence of Vastod, who was powerful enough to affect the situation, the support from the Soul Society was undoubtedly enough to destroy the hollows. With this thought, Aizen Sosok subconsciously looked in the direction of Senju Makoto, but what caught Aizen Sosok's eyes was Senju Makoto's smile that seemed to be a little regretful and reluctant. Just when Aizen Sosok was having a little doubt, Senbon spoke with a bit of sadness. Aizen-kun, thank you. I really look forward to the opportunity to fight side by side with you next time. It's just a pity that this should be the last time. At this point, Senbon looked in the direction of Senju Makoto from afar. It has come to that point, Master, that's right. It's been more than 50 years. It's time for Master to hand over Bankai. Just at this moment, a certain suction force from the dark instantly extracted the sword spirit consciousness belonging to zanpakutō Senbon, and directly returned Senbon's sword spirit consciousness to the zanpakutō itself. This also caused the spirit body originally controlled by Senbon to lose all control instantly, and the wooden giant Buddha that stood in the Hukomundo like a god of war and blocked the huge group of hollows for a long time also collapsed rapidly. Accompanied by countless sawdust, Senju Makoto almost fell straight from the air into the desert like a head-over-heels onion, and urgent shouts rang out at the same time. Makoto-kun! Makoto-kun! At the same time. At the moment when the ultimate spirit body was completely completed, before the consciousness returned to the new brain, Senju Makoto only felt that he appeared in the extremely familiar spiritual space in a trance. It was still the green grassland that seemed to have never changed, and the sky was as clear as the surface of a lake. Before Senju Cheng could react, the voice of Seireitei suddenly appeared behind him. Master Cheng-ge, are you ready? Master Bankai. Senju Cheng turned his head to look at Seireitei and asked subconsciously. Master Bankai. Don't you need to surrender first? Master Cheng-ge, didn't the Lun family surrender to you a long time ago? Seireitei replied with his head tilted. But without the ultimate spirit body, Master Cheng-ge would never be able to master the power of Bankai. Senju Cheng was a little surprised that Seireitei was so reasonable this time, and asked with some doubt. So what is the name of Bankai? The figure of Senbon Bancho gradually dissipated in front of Senju Cheng, and a completely different voice came into Senju Cheng's ears. The name of Bankai is Bancho Imperial Decree. Chapter 333. Bankai. The Universal Decree. The name of Bankai is the 10,000 Things Imperial Decree. The voice that seemed to be both deep and overbearing kept echoing in Senju Cheng's ears. The spiritual space in front of Senju Cheng suddenly changed, and green grass grew wildly towards the clear sky, carrying Senju Cheng straight into the sky. The surrounding scene was changing rapidly. Countless green light spots were also gathering towards Senju Cheng. Unconsciously, Senju Cheng's appearance in the spiritual space, which was originally wearing the Death Hegemony suit, was rapidly changing. The green light spots seemed to turn into deep black spots as they continued to gather. A large number of black spots dotted Senju Cheng's body, and in the end, it seemed to turn into a dark aura that completely covered Senju Cheng. Only Senju Cheng's hair gradually faded as it continued to grow, like a crown. However, compared with the changes on his body, Senju Cheng's attention was almost entirely on the top. As Senju Cheng approached the sky, the clear blue sky seemed to be a fake and turned into a mirror image and was shattered, exposing the endless night sky hidden behind that clear sky. Senju Cheng's eyes swept across, and when he noticed the countless bright or dark twinkling stars in the endless night sky, his pupils subconsciously condensed. No, this is not his spiritual space. No, or rather, he arrived at another special place from his spiritual space in an instant. From some particularly bright starlight, Senju Cheng subconsciously emerged a name in his mind, including Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni, Aiden Sosuk, Yunahana Retsu, etc. Where is this? Senju Cheng asked. The faint and domineering female voice responded in Senju Cheng's ear and said, This is the name. What? Senju Cheng said, and then confirmed. Who are you? Senbon Bancho. Didn't I tell you my name, my king? The next moment, from the dark feathers on Senju Cheng's body, wisps of ink floated out and turned into a mature queen who was wrapped tightly in black, but still vaguely showed her graceful figure. Then she knelt on one knee respectfully towards Senju Cheng, lowered her head slightly and answered. Bancho is my name. If my king wants me to change my name, you can also give me a name. Seeing this, Senju Cheng frowned inadvertently. Compared with the respectful and majestic queen-type woman in front of him, Senju Cheng, who was used to Senbon Bancho's unrestrained personality, was a little uncomfortable. What about Senbon Bancho? Senju Cheng asked. Bancho answered respectfully. My king has doubts in his heart. But I am also Senbon Bancho, just different personalities formed by my king's different personalities and different levels of power. Senju Cheng nodded, raised his palm slightly, and asked while initially feeling the state of entering Bankai Imperial Order. You said this is, name, what do you mean? My king, this is the literal meaning. Bankai Imperial Order replied. My king should be able to sense the current state, right? Everything that appears in front of my king is the essence of the world. Senju Cheng listened, and his eyes subconsciously looked at the stars shining in the endless night sky. This is not a real space. It seems to be closer to some kind of conceptual space, but Senju Cheng felt familiar, names from some of the stars. The name of Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni, the name of Yunahana Retsu, the name of Aizen Sosuk, etc. My king, how do you think the Soul King created the world? What is the essence of the soul? Bankai Imperial Order asked. As for this question, the former obviously exceeds the scope of information that Senju Cheng can grasp. Even the great spiritual library in the Seireitei cannot record such a secret. In fact, in a sense, this secret is probably unknown to anyone except the Soul King himself and some beings of the same era as the Soul King. However, The latter, as for the nature of the spirit particle, the dark feather fabric on Senju Cheng's body fluttered slowly and invisibly. Gradually, Senju Cheng narrowed his eyes and said with some certainty, "It can't be the name." "That's right, my king," the universal edict replied. "The spirit is the name. The foundation of the construction of soul society and Hukomundo is the name, and the foundation of the present world is the vessel." In an instant, Senju Cheng felt that all the doubts accumulated in his heart in the past were clear. The spirit is the name, therefore, the essence of the evolution of the hollow is to recognize oneself, that is, to find that true name in a certain sense. Why does the Shinigami's spiritual pressure surge after calling out the name of the Shikai and the name of the Bankai of the zanpakutō respectively? As for why Senju Cheng couldn't directly absorb the spiritual power of other spirits in the past, the essence of the reason was that he couldn't directly seize the name of others. Senju Cheng's eyes turned, and he slowly asked, "So this endless night sky in front of us is also the world of name? The countless stars in front of us represent each named dog?" "Yes, my king," Wangxiang Imperial Order replied. "Then what does it mean that I appear here?" Senju Cheng asked. "The limit of each soul is the limit that its name can carry. The name cannot exceed the name itself. This is the limitation of the world's rules. Any power that can transcend the name itself is a certain degree of violation of the power of the domain of God." Wangxiang Imperial Order replied respectfully. Hearing this, Senju Cheng's intuition has already understood it vaguely. He slowly raised his palm, and the dark feather fabric on his body seemed to be completely intertwined with the entire night sky, and said, "Spirit control. So that's it. Is the essence of spirit control the control of invisible names and blank names? Have I been invading the realm of God invisibly from the beginning?" After a pause, Senju Cheng turned to look at the Wangxiang Imperial Order who was half kneeling at his feet and said, "So, Bankai Wangxiang Imperial Order is to use one's own ultimate spirit body to truly and thoroughly give one's own traces to those invisible names?" Wangxiang Imperial Order replied. "As my king said, this is my king's power." Although he was almost sure of this guess in his heart, he was still shocked by the confirmation from Wangxiang Imperial Order and asked, "What does it mean after it is completely completed?" Wangxiang Imperial Order answered respectfully, "This means that my king has completely controlled the spirit, and all nameless spirits will completely accept my king's order. Any attack of spirits cannot harm my king. As long as there are spirits in the world, my king is immortal." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 334 Name. Hearing this, Senju Cheng has undoubtedly understood it thoroughly. Hukomundo and Soul Society are worlds built on the basis of names, or more accurately, countless blank names. Each soul represents a different name, and what Senju Cheng needs to do now is to give his own name to countless blank spirits based on the ultimate spirit body. By then, it means that Senju Cheng will control all the blank names, although it does not mean absolute invincibility, and will still be harmed by the power derived from other names. But unless it is similar to Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni, who uses Bankai Zanpakutō to burn and annihilate all the spirits in Hukomundo and Soul Society. Otherwise, even if Senju Cheng's ultimate spirit body is destroyed, Senju Cheng will not die in the true sense. For a while, countless thoughts kept rolling through Senju Cheng's mind. There is no doubt that this is absolutely a complete violation of God's power, which is already close to a certain conceptual power, making Senju Cheng infinitely close to directly incarnating spirits. Moreover, Senju Cheng had no reason to reject this power. With Senju Cheng's thought, the dark feathers on his body began to completely intertwine with the surrounding night sky, and spread invisibly in all directions. Seize the conceptual power represented by spiritual particles. In that feeling, Senju Cheng seemed to sense the existence of countless spirit particles in Soul Society and Hukomundo, and was stained with traces belonging to Senju Cheng. All invisible names will represent the name of Senju Cheng. In an instant, this also made Senju Cheng feel that his will instinctively blended with each spirit particle, at the same time. In the camp of the Expeditionary Corps, it was a mess, with a large number of Shinigami injured and filled with a sad atmosphere. The hollows were repelled. After most of the Ichike's hollows were destroyed, the Jillian hollows with chaotic consciousness also instinctively began to retreat and leave. However, this victory, which was enough to be recorded in the history of the Seireitei, almost laid the foundation for the stable victory of the Hukomundo for nearly 100 years. There was no joy in the entire expeditionary corps. Almost all the Shinigami were looking at Senju Makoto, who was held in the arms of the captain of the 2nd Division, Seireitei, and examined by the rescue team led by Amado Hanatem. Senju Makoto seemed to be sleeping soundly. His expression was still so gentle and peaceful, but there was not a trace of breath. How is it? Seireitei asked Amado Hanatem in front of him for the 23rd time. Amado Hanatem had already done that 23rd check. His face was pale, he bit his lower lip tightly, and slowly lowered his head to respond silently. Seireitei grabbed Amado Hanatem's collar and shouted angrily and sadly. Impossible, Makoto-kun must have fallen asleep. Bastard, check it out for me. Amado Hanatem, who was pulled up by force, also said with red eyes. Senju, Vice Captain Senju's spirit has completely stopped functioning. Impossible. Seireitei screamed in sorrow, but the coldness she felt while holding Senju Makoto's spirit had already given her an answer. But, impossible, how could it be possible? This is absolutely impossible. In the end, Seireitei's pupils seemed to gradually lose all their light, and her palms slipped weakly from Amado Hanatem's collar, repeating a sentence in despair. The expressions of the closest Shinigami also exuded an extremely strong sadness. Senju Makoto is undoubtedly a hero of Soul Society. He risked his life to maintain his Bankai to block a large number of hollows, and only fell down with peace of mind until the reinforcements from Soul Society arrived. He protected the expeditionary corps with his own body, interpreted the duties of a Shinigami with his own body, and protected the safety of Soul Society with his own body. He is the gentlest man, the kindest doctor, and the most reliable god of death. The name of Makoto Senju will be recorded forever in the Kachika family's friend book, will be forever engraved in the history of the Gotti 13, and will remain forever in the traces of Soul Society. I will never forget the name of Senju, will never forget Makoto's will, and will always pay tribute to the name of Makoto Senju. Kachika Byokaya sang softly in the rhythm of some kind of noble poetry, as if he was praising his best friend, and also as if he was expressing respect to Makoto Senju. Then, led by the captains, all the god of death slowly bowed to Makoto Senju as a wave swept through the entire expeditionary corps camp from the inside out. This man transcended the restrictions of the squad, and the god of death present did not hesitate to pay the highest respect to Makoto Senju. The only exception was Aizen Sasuke, who has always been synonymous with gentle and calm in the minds of the god of death. Only Aizen Sasuke was still standing there in a daze, looking very abrupt in the wave of people bowing. It was not until this moment that many Shinigami noticed that Captain Aizen, who was always gentle and kind, had an unusually distorted and ferocious expression at this moment. I don't believe it. I can't believe this kind of thing anyway. He is Senju Makoto, not an ant that can be easily crushed to death on the roadside. Aizen Sasuke, with a distorted and ferocious expression, stepped back step by step, as if to stay away from the facts in front of him. The complex and hysterical tone he muttered was full of doubts, anger and a hint of fear. There must be a fact that I overlooked somewhere. Who did it? The next moment, Aizen Sasuke grabbed his face with both hands in a fit of rage, and the black-framed glasses on his face almost exploded instantly, and the whole person disappeared instantly. However, the Shinigami present did not feel abrupt or offensive to Aizen Sasuke's unexpected behavior. Vice Captain Senju's sacrifice was a heavy and unacceptable blow to the many Shinigami who admired him. The only thing that was quite surprising was the deep bond between Captain Aizen and Vice Captain Senju. However, Vice Captain Senju's condition was not only confirmed by the rescue team, but also by many captains who had to accept it after checking it. Then, after the Technology Development Bureau opened a more stable black cavity channel, the body of Senju Makoto, who was regarded as a hero, was sent back to the Seireitei as the top priority. P.S. Based on the setting of spirit is the name, although I personally think this statement is quite reasonable and can roughly explain the outrageous abilities of the Soul King, Ithwatch, and Hyoshogu Ichibei in the later period, it is only the author's own creation. Chapter 335. A Promise Until Hell. Seireitei. In front of the opened black cavity passage, the body of Makoto Senju was sent out. As the person in charge of the funeral home, Rinka Yamada had seen the death and remains of countless death gods, and even experienced the sacrifice of her husband son Izuki Yamada more than 50 years ago. However, when the man who had been silently taking care of her for more than 50 years and gave her countless conveniences in life and work appeared in front of her in this form, Rinka Yamada could not help but feel extremely sad. Vaguely, Rinka Yamada seemed to see Makoto Senju lying in front of her, smiling gently and caring about her. At this moment, Rinka Yamada felt that the sadness in her heart this time was even greater than when Senju Yamada died in the past. Her hands, which were about to hand over Makoto Senju's body to be placed in the funeral home, could not stop shaking. Even Rinka Yamada even hoped that the man in front of her with a calm and gentle expression, who was just asleep, could open his eyes immediately and give her a warm hug, telling her with actions that he was still alive. Just as Yamada Rinka was trying to hold back her grief and was about to take over the body of Makoto Senju with tears in her eyes, a figure suddenly blocked her way. "You, Captain Unohana?" Yamada Rinka said in a daze. However, from the side face of Unohana Retsu that Yamada Rinka saw, there was not a trace of the gentle smile of the past, as if it was a piece of ice that had not melted for 1,000 years. Even to Yamada Rinka's greeting, Unohana Retsu did not react at all, and picked up the body of Makoto Senju as if no one was there. The action was extremely gentle, and Yamada Rinka also felt a bit of familiarity. Then, Unohana Retsu disappeared in front of many dead gods with Makoto Senju's body, and then returned to his own courtyard and placed Makoto Senju under the oldest and most beautiful cherry tree in the Seireitei. Unohana Retsu was like a lost soul, quietly staring at the body of Makoto Senju. After a long time, Unohana Retsu finally came back to his senses as if in a trance, and murmured, "Makoto, have you forgotten the agreement? Didn't we agree to wait for you to come back?" As he spoke, Unohana Retsu's palm gently stroked Senju Makoto's face, and his originally cold and calm eyes were unconsciously filled with tears. "You lied to me, Makoto. Do you know the price of deceiving a teacher? You should know it very well. Don't think about running away. Even if I chase you to hell, I will make you understand this thoroughly." Unohana Retsu spoke slowly, but his hands slowly stretched out his hands to pull out his zanpakutō, and Unohana Retsu's loving eyes were reflected on the blade. "Makoto, fighting is really the most wonderful thing in the world, but now, what I hope for is to have a thorough fight with you that goes straight to the soul. Hell doesn't matter, I will find you soon, Makoto." Unohana Retsu murmured while the blade of the zanpakutō slowly crossed his neck. The next moment, just as Unohana Retsu was about to exert force with his palm, he suddenly felt something pulling at his blade. Unohana Retsu's eyes turned, and what he saw was a few strands of green grass that seemed to be spreading, tightly entangled with the blade of his zanpakutō. Unohana Retsu's eyes were startled at first, and then turned into ecstasy. He turned his head and looked in the direction where the green grass spread. It was extending from his living room. Forest and Usher. Unohana Retsu immediately thought of something and ran towards the direction of the living room. As Unohana Retsu rushed into the living room, the green grass that was entangled with the blade of his zanpakutō in his hand quickly retracted into the flower arrangement forest and Usher that Unohana Retsu had cherished for more than 50 years. In Unohana Retsu's mind, the words that Senju Makoto once said also subconsciously emerged. "As long as I am not dead, then forest and water will continue to exist unchanged." Unohana Retsu asked carefully, as if he was afraid of breaking a certain hope. "Makoto, you are still alive, right?" The green grass on forest and water did not answer, but just surrounded and protected the beautiful flower in the center as before. However, at this moment, Unohana Retsu had already got the answer he wanted, and a gentle smile bloomed on his face. "I see, then let's continue the agreement." Reluctantly, "Makoto, I will wait for you to come back." The last voice was very low and firm, and in the conceptual space representing name. The dark feather woven on Senju Makoto's body spread more and more unconsciously, and wherever it passed, the endless night sky seemed to become darker and darker. Makoto Senju's understanding of name is becoming more and more profound. It is the basic thing that constitutes Hyukomundo and soul society, and it is also that deeper essence of spirit. Name is matter, rule, and power. Name is also complex. The world is constructed by the interweaving of various names, just like the name that constitutes the death hegemony. In addition to spirit particles, there are also blab, line, etc. And Makoto Senju's Bankai All Things command is the basis for Makoto Senju to have the name control of spirit particles. At the same time, Makoto Senju also understood that the endpoint of the evolution of the god of death and the hollow is to break through the limitations of their own names, so that they have the opportunity to directly control the name related to their own abilities. In a sense, it is to go from the chess piece itself to the person who plays the chess. Just as Makoto Senju was constantly controlling the spirit particles in the dark, he suddenly sensed that another will had appeared in this conceptual space of name. The next moment, the black in the endless night sky seemed to be completely tumbling, and a surging voice containing shock and anger echoed in the entire conceptual space. Who are you secretly taking away the power of name? Immediately, Senju Cheng, who was standing in the endless night sky, suddenly felt that he was locked by a certain gaze, and the black around him was actually pressing towards Senju Cheng. Boom. As Senju Cheng raised his hand, the concept called spiritual particle also rioted instantly, turning into oars in front of Senju Cheng. Obviously, in this conceptual space, black and spiritual particle are just ubiquitous concepts. However, the collision between the two produced a terrifying collision of substance. Senju Cheng, who was covered in a dark feather, turned his eyes and looked forward, only to see a bald man with very thick eyebrows and beard appear, wearing the captain's feather that Senju Cheng was very familiar with. However, behind that bald captain's Aori and the word written on it was 0. Chapter 336. Who are you? Hakushuba Wichibai. Makao Senju's expression condensed, and the dark feather cloth on his body fluttered faintly, almost covering Makao Senju's whole body. Hakushuba Wichibai, also known as the monk called by his real name. Makao Senju was able to know the information about Hakushuba Wichibai from Unohana-Retsu's description of the Zero Division. The Zero Division, also known as the Royal Secret Service, is independent of the GOTY 13. Each of the 5 members has abilities that ordinary captains can hardly achieve. Among them, Hakushuba Wichibai, who is also considered to be extremely mysterious in Unohana-Retsu's mouth, is a leader-like existence in the Zero Division. In addition to knowing the appearance of Hakushuba Wichibai, Unohana-Retsu only knows that Hakushuba Wichibai is known as the namer of all things in Soul Society, and is also that closest existence to guarding the Soul King. However, what Senju Cheng didn't expect was that, in this space that existed in the form of a concept, Hakushuba Wichibai would actually be aware of his existence and appear to attack. As Hakushuba Wichibai's figure was fully manifested, the endless black of the entire concept space called name seemed to roll more and more violently. Hakushuba Wichibai's eyes seemed to have completely turned white, staring at Senju Cheng in the distance. With white hair fallen to his waist, his whole body was covered with dark feathers, making it difficult to see his face. More importantly, when Hakushuba Wichibai saw this man, he didn't even know the corresponding name in his mind. For Hakushuba Wichibai, this was undoubtedly beyond the common sense concept that he had recognized in the past. The next moment, Hakushuba Wichibai's extremely angry voice echoed in the entire concept space. Stealing the power of the name and defending the domain of the Soul King is a capital crime. Almost at the moment when the voice of Hakushuba Wichibai faded away, endless black materialized again and pressed towards Senju Cheng, as if trying to force Senju Cheng out of this conceptual space. Imperial decree. All things belong to me. As Senju Cheng raised his eyes and spoke, the dark feathers on his body rose up like a raging black flame. Countless spiritual particles in the entire space gathered towards Senju Cheng frantically and crawled under Senju Cheng's will. Boom. The two conceptual existences collided with each other, and a huge sound was heard again. The black flames on Senju Cheng's body swayed faintly and then stabilized again. Senju Cheng spoke. I see, Hakushuba Wichibai, the name you control is black. So, what is the essential difference between you and me? This scene also made Hakushuba Wichibai's face look visibly ugly, and he slowly asked a question that was extremely unfamiliar to him. Who are you? As the nominal namer of all things in Soul Society, Hakushuba Wichibai actually knows all the names. In common sense, whether it is the life of the Shinigami itself, the Shikai and Bankai real names of the zanpakutō, or the names of all other things, Hakushuba Wichibai should know them when he sees them. Asking for a name? This feeling made Hakushuba Wichibai feel unprecedented strangeness, discomfort and anger, as if he had surpassed something that was completely beyond his control. Spirit, Senju Cheng's voice stretched out, and the black flames burning on the dark feathers on his body faintly jumped, and then he asked back. Why should I answer such a boring question? It's to help you not to have a blank when you engrave the tombstone. The next moment, the figure of Hakushuba Wichibai who appeared in front of Senju Cheng seemed to be completely integrated into the darkness, and an extremely huge black giant palm suddenly fell towards Senju Cheng from behind. Help me engrave the tombstone. I'm afraid you are far from qualified. Senju Cheng responded in a low voice, and countless spiritual particles concepts rushed towards the giant palm that gathered infinite black and collided with it. Boom boom boom. However, during the continuous collision, the situation gradually turned to a bad direction for Senju Cheng. Under the impact of countless spiritual particles, the giant black palm still slowly pressed towards Senju Cheng, and the black that occupied all of Senju Cheng's vision seemed to want to swallow everything up. Hyoshogu Ichiba's extremely angry voice continued to stir up again. Do you think that you can compete with me just by stealing a little bit of the power of name? In this space, black is endless, and the fact seems to be as Hyoshogu Ichiba said. Although the black flames ignited by the dark feather woven on Senju Cheng's body, which represents the Bankai All Things commandment, are becoming more and more frantic, they are still being suppressed by the giant palm of black. And it seems that it is about to completely overwhelm Senju Cheng. However, Senju Cheng's face is mostly covered by the dark feather woven, and the only pair of eyes exposed are not panicked at all, and even face the giant palm of black with a little mockery. Bang! The next moment, the giant palm of black fell completely, and the terrifying power produced a piece of obvious materialized ripples in the entire conceptual space. Senju Cheng's figure seemed to be completely shattered, leaving only countless strands of dark feather-woven fragments scattered everywhere. However, facing this scene, Hyoshogu Ichiba's face did not show any joy, but looked even uglier. Hyoshogu Ichiba was also quietly waiting in this conceptual space. After an unknown period of time, countless concepts with the name spiritual particles gathered together, and once again condensed into the figure of Senju Cheng wearing a dark feathered garment. Senju Cheng slowly spoke. What a boring trick, Hyoshogu Ichiba. Do you think that with just a little pressure and the inducement of words, you can make me make a wrong judgment and leave here on my own initiative? These words were transmitted to Hyoshogu Ichiba, and Hyoshogu Ichiba's eyes turned white again in anger, and he spoke. Leave now and give up the act of stealing the name. I can choose not to pursue it. This is also the last chance I give you as the guardian of the name. However, before he completely controlled all the spiritual particles, Senju Cheng knew that his grasp of the name was incomplete. If Hyoshogu Ichiba finds his true form in Hukomundo, he might choose to forcibly wipe out Senju Cheng along with a large number of spirit particles. That would be the most dangerous. Chapter 337. Team Zero arrives. So after realizing that Hyoshogu Ichiba was the one who had seized the name of Blab, Senju Cheng already knew that he probably had no way out. On the contrary, Senju Cheng insisted on staying in this conceptual space. Although Hyoshogu Ichiba's grasp of the concept of black was far higher than Senju Cheng's grasp of the concept of spirit sun, in a sense, neither side could really do anything to the other. This conceptual space called name may reflect the many names of Hukomundo and Soul Society, but Senju Cheng appeared here as consciousness rather than entity. The collision between the two sides was only a battle of consciousness, not a real battle of the entity. Hyoshogu Ichiba might be able to temporarily disperse Senju Cheng's consciousness, but he did not have the authority to directly expel Senju Cheng. What if I say no? Senju Cheng responded. You won't leave? Then I will break you up countless times, so that you will not have the chance to continue to get involved in the power of name. Almost at the moment when the voice was uttered, Hyoshogu Ichiba attacked Senju Cheng again, and the concept of black he invoked was even more exaggerated and huge. While Senju Cheng resisted as much as possible, the dark feather woven on his body continued to accelerate the mastery of the name of the spiritual particle. Seeing this, Hyoshogu Ichiba's eyes almost completely turned white, and even approached Senju Cheng to launch a close-range attack, trying to break up Senju Cheng's consciousness as quickly as possible. A weapon similar to a brush appeared in Hyoshogu Ichiba's hand, but the brush tip instantly turned into a sharp blade wrapped with countless black and chalk towards Senju Cheng. In response to Hyoshogu Ichiba, the dark feather woven on Senju Cheng's body extended to his hand to form a zanpakutō. Dang! Almost in an instant, the blades of both sides collided hundreds of times. Although the difference in the degree of control of the name between the two sides puts Makoto Senju at a great disadvantage in this conceptual space. However, Makoto Senju undoubtedly blocked the attack from Hyoshogu Ichiba and gained time to continue to control the name. Unohana-sensei, the swordsmanship he taught me really helped a lot. Compared with Makoto Senju's calm expression as he continued to resist the attack, Hyoshogu Ichiba's expression became more and more angry, and he slowly squeezed out a few words from his teeth. Zanpakutō. Kendo. So you were a god of death. Makoto Senju did not answer, and continued to speed up the control of the name. However, even if Makoto Senju's attainments in the swordsmanship allowed him to not fall into a one-sided situation when facing Hyoshogu Ichiba's close approach, the difference in the control of the name still quickly caused Makoto Senju's consciousness to be scattered by Hyoshogu Ichiba again. Soul Society, Seireitei. On a very peaceful day, the Seireitei suddenly went under martial law, and all the captains of the 13th Gotti squad were required to gather somewhere urgently. What happened? Is there something serious? What's going on? Facing the doubts of many captains, Kakushansui glanced at Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni, who was standing in the front, and then answered. The adults of the Zero Squad are suddenly coming to the Seireitei. Zero Squad. Some of the new captains were unfamiliar with this name, while some of the captains frowned subconsciously. For the Zero Squad, their only duty is almost only one definition, that is, protecting the Soul King Palace. In addition, as long as there is no threat to the Soul King Palace, the Zero Squad will not show up easily, so why would it suddenly descend on the Seireitei? However, before some captains could raise questions, a huge pillar suddenly fell from the sky above the Seireitei and hit the captains heavily. The next moment, as the smoke dissipated, two figures emerged from the pillar. Hey, Captain Yamamoto, Captain Unohana, it's great to see you old faces again, and the other new captains. Hello. One of the men with afro posed and greeted them in a hip-hop tone. I'm Banyu of the Zero Division. The other man holding the Zero Division's flag with the Shinigami pattern stroked his long and sharp airplane head and spoke. I am Cheng-ge Tenshiro of the Zero Division. Then, without waiting for Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni to ask, Cheng-ge Tenshiro spoke directly. For this sudden entry into the Seireitei, it is to find a dangerous person who may affect the balance and collapse of the three realms. This opening was an explosive statement, which made the captains present all look shocked. Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni also spoke with a solemn expression. Who? The one who responded to Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni was the extremely gloomy face of Nimyo Wangjiu, who stopped Cheng-ge Tenshiro and did not speak for a long time. For a moment, a heavy atmosphere suddenly emerged, making many captains feel a sense of crisis. The next moment, Nimyo Wangjiu scratched his afro, spread his hands and said, I don't know. Captains. Kachikabyukaya heard this, his face was full of anger, and he asked directly. Are you teasing us? Even if you were a member of the Zero Division, it does not mean that you can do such a childish thing. Kachika, Captain. Cheng-ge Tenshiro raised the corner of his mouth and said. It's obviously our own stupidity. If the Zero Division knew the specific information of that person, would they need to come to the Seireitei to look for him? Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni stepped forward and asked majestically. Can you tell me the information more directly? Facing Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni, his former direct superior and the strongest Shinigami, Cheng-ge Tenshiro also put away his contemptuous look and explained. This is a notice from Hyoshuka Wichibaya, asking us to go to Soul Society to confirm. Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni seemed to realize something when he heard it and asked. The real name is not known yet? Then how do you confirm it? Nimyo scratched his head in distress and impatiently, and said. Of course, we will confirm one by one. All Shinigami who are good at Kendo and have mastered Shikai and above must be confirmed. After a pause, Nimyo said with an extremely serious expression. In addition, all captains of the Gotti 13 must be ready to fight at any time, and be prepared for a major battle that may completely destroy the entire Seireitei. Chapter 338 The Unstoppable Fact. For a time, the entire Seireitei was almost completely nervous. Nimyo Wangjiu and Cheng-ge Tenshiro did not say more about the unknown enemy who might cause the destruction of the entire Seireitei. However, under the order of Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni, most of the Shinigami of the entire Gotti 13th Division were gathered under a strange order, and then checked by Nimyo Wangjiu and Cheng-ge Tenshiro. Even the scope of this order was so wide that it included Shinigami who were on missions outside, Kidden-sama, Menbon-sama, teachers of the Shinen Spiritual Academy, nobles, and corresponding servants, etc. However, more than half a month has passed, Nimyo Wangjiu and Cheng-ge Tenshiro still have nothing to gain, and have not been able to get a single bit of useful information. Did the boss make a mistake? I checked all the living Shinigami one by one, and there was no gain at all, Cheng-ge Tenshiro said with a tired and diffident face. But these words made Nimyo Wangjiu's eyes slightly brighten, and he spoke. Hey. Cheneo, is there a possibility? The other party faked his death. That makes sense. Cheng-ge Tenshiro was also shocked, and suddenly realized it, saying. The boss's consciousness is entangled with the guy, so the guy's body is likely in a state of being unable to move normally, and faking death is the best choice. After a pause, Cheng-ge Tenshiro said with some distress. But if that's the case, how can we find him? Namoya Wangjiu pushed the hip-hop sunglasses on his face and said word by word. For the missing, find the specific traces. For the dead, confirm the whereabouts of the bodies. Then, Namoya Wangjiu and Korinji Tenshiro searched and confirmed them one by one according to the time. In the next 6 months, almost all the missing and dead Shinigami information of the GOTY 13th Division in the past 15 years was confirmed, and then they saw the tensely packed list of Shinigami who sacrificed in the Expeditionary Corps 15 years ago. For a moment, even Namoya Wangyu and Korinji Tenshiro felt their scalps tingling when they saw the names on the list that exceeded 500. TSK, the first one is, the Vice Captain of the 4th Division, Senju Cheng-ge. The whereabouts of the body is, when he said this, Korinji Tenshiro's voice could not help but pause, and then the volume suddenly soared, exclaiming. It was kept in the residence by the Captain of the 4th Division, Unohana Retsu. In an instant, not to mention Korinji Tenshiro, even Namoya Wangyu was shocked and blinked repeatedly, looking at the records on the document in disbelief. Soon, as Namoya Wangyu and Korinji Tenshiro visited Unohana Retsu together to confirm the authenticity of this information. Holding the teacup in both hands, the gentle smile on Unohana Retsu's face suddenly stagnated, and slowly raised his eyes full of murderous intent to look at Namoya Wangyu and Korinji Tenshiro. Suddenly, even Namoya Wangyu and Korinji Tenshiro couldn't help but feel a chill on their backs. Even in the Zero Division, Unohana Retsu is older than many members. In terms of Kendo, there is no one in the Zero Division who can compare with him. Especially Korinji Tenshiro. He was the one who put a knife on Unohana Retsu's neck, and then voluntarily taught Unohana Retsu all the Kido and medical skills, and voluntarily gave up the position of Captain of the 4th Division to be promoted to the Zero Division. After a long time, Unohana Retsu slowly uttered 2 words. Is there something? Korinji Tenshiro, who recalled some not-so-good memories, repeatedly extended his hand to poke Namoya Wangjiu in a subtle way. Namoya Wangjiu glanced at Korinji Tenshiro, then coughed lightly, and said with a questioning tone. Can we see Senju Cheng's body? Yes, Unohana Retsu nodded slowly, but his hand reached out to the handle of the zanpakutō, and then said. Just right, I'm afraid Cheng will feel lonely lying alone. Wait, Korinji Tenshiro realized that this was a sign that Unohana Retsu was about to take action, and quickly raised his hand and said. Captain Unohana, we are old acquaintances. There is really no ill will at all. I just want to confirm some situations and why that body is preserved. Reason. In an instant, the spiritual pressure on Unohana Retsu's body, which was like blood, burst out, and his devil-like eyes revealed grief, resentment and ferocity, and he spoke. 15 years ago, my most beloved disciple died in order to protect the Soul Society and fight against the Hollows. I also want to ask why. Now, even I am questioned for keeping Cheng's body and leaving a trace of memory. Namoya Wangjiu frowned, and while he was still thinking about something, Korinji Tenshiro pulled Namoya Wangjiu, then shook his head obscurely, and directly pulled Namoya Wangjiu away. Forget it. I've learned about the former Vice Captain of the 4th Division, Senju Cheng. His Kendo talent has been quite poor since he entered the Mao Spiritual Academy, and he has never shown any high level of Kendo. He doesn't meet the initial screening criteria. After a pause, Korinji Tenshiro said with some helplessness and emotion. Besides, Captain Unohana's sadness cannot be faked. If she continues to insist, Captain Unohana may really take action. There is no point in breaking up with Captain Unohana. Namoya Wangjiu scratched his afro and said in agreement. That's right. Helplessly, Namoya Wangjiu and Korinji Tenshiro could only continue to check one by one, trying to get a little bit of useful information. And in the conceptual space called name. Senju Cheng has no idea how many times his consciousness has been dispersed by Hyoshuga, and then he recondensed his consciousness with his will. It keeps going back and forth, and keeps circulating, whether it's Hyoshuga or Senju Cheng, both sides are persisting. Hyoshuga insisted on hoping that Unohana Wangjiu and Korinji Tenshiro could find clues about Senju Cheng's true body, and then directly eliminate Senju Cheng in the outside world. Senju Cheng insisted on undoubtedly completely completing the mastery of the name of the spiritual particle. In the continuous battles, as Senju Cheng's mastery of the name deepened, facing Hyoshuga's crazy attacks, the time he could hold on was getting longer and longer. The dark feather fabric on Senju Cheng's body seemed to have been completely intertwined and integrated with all the spiritual particles in the entire conceptual space. Gradually, Hyoshuga also realized a fact: it was no longer possible to stop the man in front of him from stealing the power of the name. Chapter 339 A Real Power, Name. Hyoshogu Ichiba's white eyes stared at the man in front of him. His body was almost completely covered by the dark feather veil, and even half of his face was completely covered. Only his long pure white hair fluttered slowly and was extremely conspicuous, just like a special crown. At this moment, Hyoshogu Ichiba could roughly sense that this man's control over the name of spiritual particles had reached about 50%. At this point, Hyoshogu Ichiba knew that this delay no longer had any meaning, and it was impossible to let more than half of the spirit particles in Hukomundo and Soul Society be buried with this man. I really can't do anything with you. Suddenly, Hyoshogu Ichiba seemed to have completely given up, and stopped the attack that had lasted for more than 10 years. His extremely ferocious expression actually became a little more naive and said honestly, "At this point, even if you don't want to admit it, there is nothing you can do." Senju Cheng raised his eyes slightly and looked at Hyoshogu Ichiba. "By the way, I don't think I've introduced myself yet." "That's really rude." Hyoshogu Ichiba bowed slightly and said, "I'm Hyoshogu Ichiba, a member of the 0th Division, also known as real name Calling Monk. I usually live in the Soul King Palace and always protect the Soul King's safety." "So?" Senju Cheng asked coldly. "Don't get me wrong, sir. I tried to stop you before just to prevent the world from collapsing. But now that things have come to this, I also understand that I can't stop your will at all." At this point, Hyoshogu Ichiba sighed, scratched his head, and spoke to himself. "At your level, you should have realized the truth of the world, right? What is the essence of the spirit particles and instrument particles that make up the world in common sense? Among them, it is different from the present world composed of the most stable instrument particles. The main foundation of Soul Society and Hukomundo, spirit particles, is part of the name. Therefore, once part of the power of the name is controlled by a certain existence, it will cause turmoil in the world. That's why I tried my best to stop you before." The dark feather cloth on Senju Cheng's body moved slowly, and he seemed to be half believing and half doubting. "So, your actions are all to protect the safety of Hukomundo and Soul Society?" "That's right." Hyoshogu Ichiba nodded repeatedly and said naively, "It's just that my ability is limited. Since I can't stop it physically, I can only try to communicate with words now. I hope you can understand the seriousness of the matter." After a pause, Hyoshogu Ichiba sighed again and said, "At least, I hope you won't destroy Soul Society and Hukomundo. If you just want to have some kind of status and authority, everything can be discussed. You can contact me at any time through Yamamoto Shinigami Shijakuni of the Seireitei. How about that?" Senju Cheng pondered for a long time, nodded with some intention, and replied, "I see. Yeah, that's good." Hearing this, Hyoshogu Ichiba seemed to relax, and smiled again as he reminded, "Then please don't forget the agreement, otherwise if you destroy Soul Society or Hukomundo on a large scale, even if none of us can really do anything to each other, I will definitely do my best to stop you." After saying that, Hyoshogu Ichiba waved his hand at Senju Cheng, and his figure slowly and completely merged into a piece of black, disappearing without a trace. And the next moment, as Hyoshogu Ichiba slowly opened his eyes in the Soul King Palace, his eyes revealed an extremely strong murderous intent. Then, Hyoshogu Ichiba slowly walked to the edge of the palace, looking down at the boundless sky in front of him, and wrote the word Spirit Sun in the void with the huge brush in his hand. The black that seemed like ink passed through the void as the brush seemed to leave a clear trace, but the next moment, the black words of the word Spirit Sun disintegrated. Witnessing this scene, Hyoshogu Ichiba's face was extremely gloomy, and he muttered to himself silently, Who is it? A puppet of Yafwaj? No. Or is it the Soul King? No. The Soul King no longer has self-awareness. Even if he wants to regret it, he has no chance. Then who else could it be? A guy who is completely out of the plan. And in the conceptual space, Senju Cheng's eyes flashed with a little disdain for Hyoshogu Ichiba's departure. 0th Division? Looking down from above and controlling the world for too long, has even acting become so stiff? Compared with Aizen Sosok's acting, Hyoshogu Ichiba's acting is undoubtedly full of flaws in Senju Cheng's opinion. However, Senju Cheng, who also hates this meaningless battle, should cooperate with Hyoshogu Ichiba's performance and act as if he doesn't believe it. In fact, for Hyoshogu Ichiba's words, Senju Cheng almost doesn't believe most of the information in them. expressing his difficulties and showing weakness, implicitly stating that he has no way to deal with Senju Makoto. This just makes Senju Makoto feel more deeply the murderous intention from Hyoshuga Ichibara, and Hyoshuga Ichibara must have some means to deal with him. Perhaps it's in the Soul King Palace. Similar to the Way of Sealing. All kinds of speculations emerged in Senju Makoto's mind, and he continued to speed up the control of the Spirit Sun. Time keeps flying. Without the interference of Hyoshuga Ichibara, Senju Makoto's control of spiritual particles is undoubtedly several times faster. As the last concept in the conceptual space, which is filled with the concept of spiritual particles, intertwined with the dark feathers, Senju Makoto's eyes also turned completely white in an instant. That is name. It is like Hyoshuga Ichibara has mastered the existence of black in the world. As long as black does not completely disappear, Hyoshuga Ichibara will also be in immortal existence. As long as there are invisible free spiritual particles in the world, Senju Makoto will always exist like a king supported by countless spirit particles. This is the real spiritual particle control. The 10,000 Things command, this is the real spiritual control under the Bankai state, right? It is also your true power. No wonder you asked me to complete the ultimate spiritual body no matter what. As Senju Makoto muttered, the black feathers on his body fluttered, and he once again transformed into the image of the Queen Sword Soul of the 10,000 Things command, and answered respectfully. My king, this is spiritual control, but it is not all power. Chapter 340 Instrument. What? Senju Makoto was also startled when he heard this, and asked. The Universal Edict, what do you mean? My king, the Universal Edict never contains only spirit particles. The Universal Edict replied. Senju Makoto reacted instantly, narrowed his eyes slightly, and said, Instrument. In response to Senju Makoto, the Universal Edict nodded slightly. However, this answer was undoubtedly abnormal in Senju Makoto's cognition, and he said subconsciously. How is that possible? You know, unlike spirit particles, the nature of instrument particles is completely different in the cognition of the Shinigami. In terms of characteristics, instrument particles are extremely inert, stable, and do not have any energy fluctuations. Therefore, the main research of the Shinigami on instrument particles is mostly focused on developing artificial bodies to facilitate the actions of the Shinigami's spirit bodies in the world. In the historical records of Soul Society, even the group of queensies whose bodies are composed of instrument particles still manipulate the form of power of spirit particles. Therefore, in the cognition of the Shinigami, the vessel, which is the basis of the material composition of the present world, is almost used to temporarily accommodate the spirit particle. My king, please do not be misled by some woven common sense. The 10,000 Things command replied calmly. The fact I know is that the vessel is undoubtedly one of the 10,000 things, but my king awakened his power in the form of a spirit body, so he only possesses the power of spirit particle control. Then what is the use of the vessel? Senju Makoto asked with a frown. The 10,000 Things command frowned slightly, shook his head, and his figure slowly dissipated and returned to the dark feather cloth. A voice came into Senju Makoto's ears. I only understand that for the king, only the name and the vessel cannot be entrusted to others, but I don't know what the specific purpose is. Senju Makoto heard this and then pondered for a long time. In a sense, Senju Makoto has truly stood at the end of evolution that Aizen Sosok dreamed of, completely transcending the boundary between the Shinigami and the Hollow. Like Hyoshuga Ichibara, Makoto Senju has become the controller of part of the name. But this also means that there is almost no way forward for Makoto Senju. And it is quite embarrassing that Makoto Senju cannot easily return to Soul Society to avoid being noticed by Hyoshuga Ichibara. Otherwise, with the power of Squad Zero, Makoto Senju will be the enemy of the entire Seireitei, and Unohana-Retsu's situation will become extremely bad. Unohana-Retsu's combat power may be the ceiling level of Soul Society, but after all, he is not like Makoto Senju and Hyoshuga Ichibara, who truly control part of the name and are immortal. More importantly, Hyoshuga Ichibara's behavior that seems to lure him to show up is undoubtedly a conspiracy. It seems that maybe I should first understand what the Kitsuko is all about. An idea gradually emerged in Makoto Senju's mind. In a layer somewhere between the Great Hollow Forest of Utomundo and the surface desert geology, a sphere that seemed to be made of dead wood was constantly moving at a certain fixed speed. And in this sphere, Senju Makoto slowly opened his eyes and suddenly felt that his body seemed to be pressed by something. Senju Makoto looked down and saw that it was a little boy lying on his chest and sleeping soundly, and even some unknown liquid was flowing from that corner of his mouth. The next moment, Senju Cheng recognized the little boy's appearance of Vastop and said, "Wake up, Synopsis." In an instant, Synopsis suddenly woke up and sat up. When he saw Senju Cheng, who had restored the facial features of the god of death in front of him, woke up, he said with surprise and joy, "Master, you finally woke up." "Master." Senju Cheng subconsciously felt a sense of weirdness for this strange name, especially when it came from the mouth of a little boy. If it was Lily, no, Lily can't say such a strange name. However, compared to this detail, Senju Cheng, whose consciousness had experienced a long time in that conceptual space of name, was more concerned about another question. "How long have I been asleep?" It seems, Snops counted on his fingers and then answered. "It seems to be more than 30 years. More than 30 years. Although Senju Cheng had a vague feeling, he was still shocked when he heard this exact number. My youth was wasted by the bald donkey. In an instant, Senju Cheng was full of resentment towards Hyoshuba, especially under the threat of Hyoshuba. He could not even return to the Seireitei for the time being. Then, Senju Cheng subconsciously looked down at his body, and then he noticed that his hair had turned pure white like the conceptual space. Although white hair is not extremely rare in this world, it still made Senju Cheng inexplicably feel quite strange. Unohana-sensei is over 1,000 years old, with long black hair like a waterfall, and her appearance and skin still looked like a young girl. Time seems to have left no traces on her. On the contrary, I have grey hair early. Ah, Senju Cheng couldn't help but sigh. "Master, what's wrong with you?" Synopsis asked nervously and concernedly. "You are still young, you don't understand." Senju Cheng looked at the clothes on his body that had been tattered in more than 30 years. Then, with a thought, Senju Cheng's spirit particles quickly reconstructed and woven a piece of clothing that was similar to the Death Hacker suit, but more comfortable and beautiful than the Death Hacker suit, and then spoke. "Synopsis, help me open the black cavity leading to the present world." "Yes, Master." Synopsis heard the words, and his fingers quickly tapped the void in front of him, and a black cavity passage as high as a person appeared in front of Senju Cheng. Senju Cheng's eyes swept around the spirit particles that formed the black cavity passage. Just as he was about to step into the black cavity, he noticed Synopsis' expression of wanting to say something but stopping. "Is there anything you want to say, Synopsis?" Synopsis seemed a little frightened, and hurriedly stretched his body in front of Senju Cheng, asking nervously, Master, are you going to the real world? You helped me open the black cavity passage, what do you think?" Senju Cheng asked back. I. Under Senju Cheng's gaze, the nervous Synopsis took a deep breath and said hurriedly, "Master, I want to follow you." After saying this, Synopsis seemed to vent, and said loudly with his eyes closed, "It doesn't matter where we go, I want to follow the Master, no matter what I can do. By the way, Master, I haven't devoured the souls of those gods of death and humans for more than 80 years according to the Master's instructions. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 341. Just a difference in race. For a moment, in the space of this deadwood sphere, Synopsis felt that the atmosphere seemed to be completely dead, and there was no response that he expected in his heart for a long time. Master, are you leaving again?" Synopsis, with his eyes closed, felt a sense of loss in his heart. For Synopsis, who was promoted to the level of Vastop Great Hollow with faith as his belief, Senju Cheng was the most important existence in Synopsis' heart. It was for this reason that after hearing the news of Senju Cheng from Haribo's mouth for the first time, Synopsis was so ecstatic that he dug through the desert directly from the Great Hollow Forest, and subconsciously trusted Haribo as a companion. However, when Synopsis slowly opened his eyes, he found that Senju Cheng's eyes were looking at him tenderly, and he spoke. "Synopsis, you have been guarding me for more than 30 years, right?" Yes, Master." Synopsis responded quickly. Senju Cheng pondered for a moment and spoke. "If it were in the past, I would never agree to it, considering the huge commotion that a Vastop-level hollow would cause in the world." Synopsis heard this, pursed his lips tightly, and for the first time, he clearly and intuitively felt the huge racial barrier between the hollow and the god of death. Does the difference in race mean that he can't follow his master? But, then, Senju Cheng changed his tone and said with a smile. "It's okay now, but there are not many powerful souls in the world that you can devour. If you can bear that feeling, then follow. In an instant, Synopsis' face was obviously filled with joy, and he responded without hesitation. Yes, Master. Senju Cheng saw this and seemed to remember something, and said. Also, close your eyes and hold on to that joy. Synopsis, who was a little confused, heard the words and subconsciously followed Senju Cheng's orders. The next moment, Senju Cheng's palm pressed on Synopsis' body. In an instant, Synopsis felt that the surrounding spirits were inexplicably gathering towards him, and something seemed to be happening inside his body. Crack, crack, with a crisp sound of the mask breaking, the hollow mask that covered most of Synopsis' face cracked, and some of the remaining hollow features on Synopsis slowly disappeared. In just a few breaths, Synopsis' appearance was almost the same as that of a real human boy, and the spiritual pressure on Synopsis was constantly soaring. In the end, when the spiritual pressure soared to a certain peak and then quickly fell back, Synopsis had a zanpakutō in his hand. Synopsis picked up the zanpakutō in astonishment, and felt his body that seemed to have undergone some huge changes, and looked at Senju Cheng with surprise. Master, is this the Seireitei transformation? Senju Cheng replied. Yes, and it is a perfect self-transformation of Seireitei, which is also a reward for your past loyalty. In this way, even if you follow me to the real world and do not devour souls for a long time, you will not feel weak. Thank you, Master. Synopsis held his zanpakutō more awkwardly with both hands, and said with great emotion. Senju Cheng waved his hand and said. If you really want to thank me, then change the name, Master or something like that, it's too weird. Then the honorific name is Supreme Merciful Eternal Peace and Harmony Chongshan Thousand-Handed Buddha, is it okay? Synopsis asked carefully. Senju Cheng. Immediately, Senju Cheng corrected without hesitation. Senju Cheng, this is my real name, remember it. Yes, Master Senju, I will completely engrave this name in my soul. Synopsis replied quickly. Senju Cheng was too lazy to correct Synopsis' behavior that seemed to be too worshipful and respectful, and walked straight into the black cavity and headed for the real world. Seeing this, Synopsis hurriedly followed and shouted. Wait for me, Master Senju, I'll lead the way for you. In the present world, on a drizzling street, a black cavity suddenly opened, and Senju Cheng, while bringing Synopsis to the present world, also manipulated the thin spirit particles in the present world to combine in the form of a ghost barrier, temporarily isolating the spiritual pressure fluctuations of Senju Cheng and Synopsis. Otherwise, with the spiritual pressure fluctuations of Senju Cheng and Synopsis, it is probably enough to cause a large number of human casualties in an instant with just an unintentional leak. Compared with the Shinigami and the Hollows, humans whose bodies are composed of instruments and do not have spirit particles, are too weak. It is precisely because of this that instruments have never been valued by the Soul Society. Senju Cheng, who knows the efficiency of the Shinigami, did not stay where he was, and quickly disappeared in the drizzle with Synopsis. Soon, a Shinigami from the 13th Division wearing a Shinigami costume appeared near the location where the black cavity disappeared, explored it carefully, and then reported the situation to the Seireitei. No strong spiritual pressure was found near the fluctuation of the black cavity, and it is suspected that the black cavity was opened by an ordinary hollow. However, what the Shinigami did not know is that on a roof note that he could not see, Senju Cheng looked at the familiar Shinigami costume, and a trace of nostalgia rose in his heart, muttering. What a pity, I don't know and I can wear the Shinigami costume openly next time. These words reached Synopsis' ears, making Synopsis blink his eyes, looking at the weak Shinigami not far away, and couldn't help but ponder in his heart. Master likes that set of clothes. If there is a chance, I must help the Master grab it. Senju Cheng naturally did not notice Synopsis' thoughts at all, but closed his eyes slightly to feel the instrument in the present world. The instruments were slowly gathering towards Senju Cheng, as if they had some kind of attraction. However, Senju Cheng tried to manipulate these instruments, but there was no reaction at all. Until some of the instruments touched Senju Cheng's spirit body, Senju Cheng looked down and found a very interesting scene. The ultimate spirit body, which had already reached a certain limit, was combined with the instruments. Moreover, it was not just similar to the relationship between the artificial body and the god of death. The spirit particles were only temporarily contained in the instruments, but were faintly merging with each other. Instruments, spirit particles, what Senju Cheng was thinking. Senju Cheng seemed to sense something and looked up. He saw that the spiritual power flows that were extremely clear in Senju Cheng's eyes were simultaneously stripped and extracted from different directions in the world, and were converging towards a certain place in the sky. Chapter 342 Kuroseki Masaki. What is that? Senju Cheng pushed his glasses up subconsciously while thinking, and then realized that he was not wearing glasses in this body. Spiritual flow. Senju Cheng muttered. Synopsis on the side asked in confusion. Master Senju, what spiritual flow? Senju Cheng pointed at the spiritual flows in the sky that were converging from all directions to a certain direction and asked. Can't you see it? Synopsis followed the direction pointed by Senju Cheng and tried to open his eyes wide, his eyes full of a clear confusion. Senju Cheng saw this and knew the answer from Synopsis's eyes. Immediately, Senju Cheng frowned slightly, his eyes fell on the source of the spiritual flow that was quite close to him and quite large, and his figure quickly flashed forward. In just a blink of an eye, Senju Cheng crossed the distance of most of the city and arrived near the spiritual flow. Senju Cheng's eyes first swept over an ordinary Seireitei and the fainted human boy, and then fell on the orange-haired young woman. That stream of spiritual power was being drawn out of her body, and the young woman with big waves was also wailing in pain. This scene made Senju Cheng inexplicably feel familiar, and when he was about to get closer to study the specific changes that had taken place in the young woman with big waves, Senju Cheng's steps suddenly paused, and he felt that there was a special spiritual particle structure nearby. His eyes turned, as the extremely secret spiritual particle item came into Senju Cheng's eyes. Senju Cheng's thoughts quickly extended along the spiritual particle item to somewhere. The next moment, a picture appeared in Senju Cheng's mind. In the dim room, the screen playing the real-world scene flickered, and three figures were standing in front of the screen, Aizen Sasuke, Ichimura Jin, Tosen. Perhaps, the density of spirit particles in the real world is thin, but for Senju has completely mastered the name of spirit particles, it is not difficult to do such a thing. Of course, Senju's thoughts are limited, and it is impossible for him to monitor everything that happens in the entire Soul Society and Hugo Mundo at the same time. Senju's eyes moved, and he understood it instantly, and his eyes fell on the human boy who fainted on the ground not far away. There seems to be only one person who is worthy of such attention from Aizen Sasuke and others Ichigo Kuroseki. If the one who appeared in front of Senju's Ichigo Kuroseki in his childhood, then the one next to him was his queency mother, Masaki Kuroseki, Sho. But, what about the scene in front of Masaki Kuroseki being drawn out of the spiritual power flow? P.S. Regarding the setting that Senju Cheng knows about the original plot, it is limited to knowing the existence of Yubak in the 1000-year Blood War, but the specific plot is unclear. However, one thing that can be confirmed is that Aizen Sasuke is indeed monitoring Kuroseki Ichigo all the time. It is even very likely that the hollow that looks no different from an ordinary hollow, but in fact seems to have undergone a defective Arensei, is secretly assigned by Aizen Sasuke. In just a moment, all kinds of speculations appeared in Senju Cheng's mind. However, as the protagonist in the original plot, the value of Kuroseki Ichigo, whether it is used for observation, research, or experiments, there is no doubt, and in the moment when Senju Cheng was thinking, the spiritual power flow on Kuroseki Masaki's body quickly became thinner. Instead, Kuroseki Masaki gradually showed signs of hollow, and white substances similar to hollows oozed out from his mouth, nose, eyes, and ears. Hollow. This scene was undoubtedly very familiar to Senju Cheng. In the hollowification incident of the Seireitei, the hollowified Shinigami also experienced similar situations in the early stage. As Kuroseki Masaki began to show hollowification and knelt on the ground in pain and wailed, the ordinary Arensei hollow that was originally on the side became restless. However, the target of the ordinary Arensei hollow was Kuroseki Ichigo in his childhood. Born with powerful spiritual power from his soul, the young Kuroseki Ichigo was always a deadly temptation for ordinary hollows. As the ordinary Arensei hollow noticed that the hidden threat from Kuroseki Masaki was disappearing, and Kuroseki Masaki was turning into a hollow. This made the ordinary Arensei hollow no longer able to suppress its instinctive desire. Its huge body, which was almost like an elephant, opened its bloody mouth and pounced on Kuroseki Ichigo, wanting to swallow the unconscious Kuroseki Ichigo completely into its mouth. The rain was still falling. Kuroseki Masaki could clearly feel his extremely weak body gradually sliding into the abyss of hollowification. The queency power in his body had disappeared inexplicably. The loss of his own spiritual power even made Kuroseki Masaki unable to see the appearance of hollow. The pain was not just physical pain. During the hollowification, the pain even seeped out from his soul. However, in this continuous rain, Kurosaki Masaki saw large pieces of raindrops that seemed to be smashed by a huge transparent existence and rushed towards Kurosaki Ichigo. Ichigo is in danger. In an instant, the weak and extremely painful Kurosaki Masaki also felt a surge of strength from nowhere, and the whole person suddenly threw himself on the body of the young Kurosaki Ichigo, protecting Kurosaki Ichigo under his body. Behind Kurosaki Masaki, the mouth of the ordinary Yarensei hollow had already opened, revealing rows of tensely packed teeth, ready to completely close towards Kurosaki Masaki. In the blink of an eye, Kurosaki Masaki suddenly felt a figure beside him, and a muffled sound suddenly rang out from behind him. Bang! Kurosaki Masaki forced his eyes open, which were gradually becoming blurry, and raised his head to look at the figure beside him. It was not his childhood sweetheart Ishida Ryujin, nor was it his husband Kurosaki Ishin, but a gentle and unfamiliar face. In the drizzle, the conspicuous white hair was not messy, the eyes were gentle and deep, and the handsome features were not so unattainable. "Are you okay?" Knowing that this place was being monitored by Aizen Sosok, Senju Makoto gently said some nonsense, but the gentle voice made Kurosaki Masaki inexplicably trust Senju Makoto, and she spoke with difficulty. "Sir, can you please protect my child, Kurosaki Ichigo?" The Kurosaki family, chapter 343. Do or not. Before Kurosaki Masaki finished speaking, Senju Makoto's eyes widened, as if revealing a deep surprise. "Wait, Kurosaki family? My last name is Kurosaki too?" These words immediately confused Kurosaki Masaki, whose rationality was close to the limit. Senju Makoto asked hurriedly and puzzledly. "Wait, what's going on with you? Hollowification? Aren't you a human? How come your body shows signs of hollowing directly?" However, although Kurosaki Masaki had countless doubts in her heart, her consciousness had already reached the limit. The traces of hollowing that had originally seeped out of her facial features increased several times almost instantly. Senju Makoto saw this, and made a shocked and puzzled expression on his face. He quickly put Kurosaki Masaki on the ground, and glanced at the spirit props that Aizen Sosok was monitoring. Then, Senju Makoto examined and studied Kurosaki Masaki openly in front of Aizen Sosok. Far away in front of the screen in Soul Society, Aizen Sosok's eyes fell on Senju Makoto, and a bit of doubt appeared on his face, and he murmured, "Human? Human? Senju Makoto is certainly not." Originally, as he realized that Aizen Sosok was monitoring Kurosaki Masaki and Kurosaki Ichigo, Senju Makoto was already hesitating whether to intervene in his situation. Although for Senju Makoto, changing his spirit body appearance is just a piece of cake. But with Aizen Sosok's sensitivity, whether he appears as a Shinigami or an Arensei, it will appear extremely suspicious. But when Senju Makoto reacted, he suddenly found that the instrument that naturally began to slowly merge with the extreme spirit, he could easily control it like a spirit. Then, under Senju Makoto's attempt, he successfully placed those instruments on the surface of his body, forming a layer of shell that is completely consistent with humans. Therefore, whether it is Kurosaki Masaki who is close at hand or Aizen Sosok who is far away in Soul Society, the first judgment of Senju Makoto is that he is a human. In order to avoid Aizen Sosok's suspicion of Senju Makoto's rescue of Kurosaki Masaki, Senju Makoto simply took the opportunity to disguise himself as a Kurosaki and a Quincy. Anyway, as far as Senju Makoto knows, the Quincy survivors also have a very large number, and the same surname is not surprising at all. And as a group that manipulates spirit particles to fight, Senju Makoto believes that there will be no flaws in integrating into the Quincy. Even with Senju Makoto's priority in controlling spirit particles, he believes that he is qualified to be the king of the Quincy. As Senju Makoto examined Kurosaki Masaki's body, he discovered that the situation seemed to be more complicated than imagined. In Kurosaki Masaki's body, not only is there some hollow power left, but also the power of the Shinigami and the power of the Quincy that she possesses. It's almost like a hodgepodge. However, the power of the Quincy now seems to have been completely extracted with the spiritual power flow. This caused the delicate balance of hollows, Shinigami and Quincy in Kurosaki Masaki's body to be broken, and the body showed signs of hollowing. So, the spiritual power flow just now forced the power of the Quincy to be extracted. Thinking of this, Senju Makoto couldn't help but hesitate about how to deal with the big wavy young woman lying in front of him in the misty drizzle. Kurosaki Masaki's situation is complicated, and it may not be difficult for Senju Cheng to solve it. Either directly extract the remaining hollows in the body, and then repair the life deficit caused by the forced extraction of the Queency power. Or, directly replenish that part of the Queency power, so that Kurosaki Masaki can return to her original state. However, for others, these two options are almost as difficult as recreating life. Should I do it? Makoto Senju fell into a moment of hesitation. If he did it, how to explain it afterwards would be a big problem. If he didn't do it, what's the difference between him and a beast? Even if he abandoned the value and benefits of Kurosaki Masaki's identity as Kurosaki Ichigo's mother, as a doctor, would Makoto Senju have to watch a mother who risked her life to protect her child die? Do it. Even if it wasn't for Kurosaki Ichigo, Makoto Senju, who had his own moral integrity and perseverance, quickly made a choice. Of course. How to do it? In what way to do it? Makoto Senju undoubtedly needs to weigh the difference. Several plans quickly emerged in Senju Makoto's mind, and then were rejected one by one. After all, even if Kurosaki Ichigo is now in a coma, there is no one around, and Senju Makoto doesn't have to worry about being exposed even if he is bold. However, Senju Makoto knows very well that Aizen Sasuke, Ichimura-jin and Tosen Kaname are watching the live broadcast. Oh, sorry, Tosen Kaname is blind, so Tosen Kaname can only listen at most. In the materials that Senju Makoto accidentally read in the Seireitei, an interesting characteristic was clearly recorded, that is, all Queency have a certain consistent bloodliner, which is suspected to be the reason why Queency can absorb spirit particles from the outside world to fight. In addition, it seems that the classification of pure-blooded Queency and mixed-blooded Queency in the Queency group is also based on the purity of the part of the bloodliner. Through the body composed of the instrument, Senju Makoto could almost clearly sense all the changes in the spirit particles in Kurosaki Masaki's body at close range. Interestingly, Senju Makoto's temporary examination of Kurosaki Masaki in this way found that part of the spirit particles had been damaged to an extreme extent, and the remaining part gradually formed a silver-like structure in the heart, producing fatal thrombosis symptoms. In other words, within the body of the instrument, there is a part of the blood composed of spirit particles that is constantly circulating and carrying the power of the Queency. If that's the case, Senju Makoto thought, and in front of Aizen Sasuke's supervision, he picked up the cross-structured bracelet on Kurosaki Masaki's wrist and suddenly stacked it into his own hand. The device controlled by Senju Makoto then formed a lifelike wound, and blood flowed out. Then, Senju Makoto put his palm to Kurosaki Masaki's mouth, pretending to feed his blood to Kurosaki Masaki. In fact, Senju Makoto's palm was in the blind spot of Aizen Sasuke's surveillance, and his palm was slowly pressed on the position of Kurosaki Masaki's heart. Chapter 344 You don't miss your mother either, and, of course, those fate bloods can't save Kurosaki Masaki from such a bad state. In fact, Senju Makoto is confident that he can solve Kurosaki Masaki's situation, which is undoubtedly due to his own ability spiritual control. As long as Senju Makoto has completed the analysis of anything related to spirit particles, there is nothing that Senju Makoto cannot construct. The universal command. Although for Senju Makoto, this universal is limited to the scope of spirit particles, since Kurosaki Masaki's bad condition is related to the blood composed of spirit particles, there is no doubt. However, the factors that may cause death in Kurosaki Masaki now, in addition to the hollowing, are also related to the silver blood clots that are condensed in the heart by the residual blood. Once the silver blood clots are truly formed, Senju Makoto can't do the work of directly digging out the flesh composed of instruments like a spirit body, and can also quickly repair it. At the time, for the human body, the silver blood clots formed in the heart are enough to kill. Furthermore, it would take Senju Makoto enough time to analyze the remaining Queency blood in Kurosaki Masaki's body. Therefore, before that, Senju Makoto could only put his palm close to Kurosaki Masaki's chest, and slowly rotate his palm to drive the blood spirit in the heart with the ability of spirit control, and delay that coagulation speed of the silver blood clot as much as possible. The rain seemed to be getting heavier, it kept falling on the ground. This did not affect Senju Makoto's concentration as a doctor. One hand was placed on Kurosaki Masaki's mouth as if feeding blood, and the other hand kept rotating in a certain rhythm, and then tried his best to analyze the blood structure of the Queency. However, the bean-sized raindrops kept falling. The young Kurosaki Ichigo, who was lying on the ground, slowly woke up and sat up subconsciously. When his confused mind was still recalling the last scene before he fell into a coma, everything that came into his eyes made Kurosaki Ichigo's eyes shrink suddenly. A strange man is talking to his mother. Mother, the rain is getting heavier, making Ichigo Kurosaki's view of the surrounding environment quite blurry. But that can't be wrong, therefore, Makoto Senju and Masaki Kurosaki are right next to Ichigo Kurosaki. Ichigo Kurosaki felt as if his head was about to explode with a bang, and his brain fell into a blank. The instinctive anger caused the spiritual pressure that Ichigo Kurosaki, who was only 9 years old, to inadvertently leak out to surge a lot. The sudden change in spiritual pressure made Makoto Senju, who was extremely focused, turn his head in surprise, and then he noticed the orange-headed kid Ichigo Kurosaki next to him. In an instant, Makoto Senju, who was experienced, also realized the possible misunderstanding between the doctor and the patient, and the palm that was pressed on Masaki Kurosaki's chest was quickly retracted. The next moment, the 9-year-old Ichigo Kurosaki seemed to have not even lost his baby voice, but he roared and rushed towards Makoto Senju, waving his little fists and hitting Makoto Senju repeatedly. Damn, bastard, what are you doing to your mother? However, for Makoto Senju at this moment, in order to treat Kurosaki Masaki, he was almost racing against time to analyze the queency blood in her body through her flesh. There was no time to waste on Kurosaki Ichigo. Immediately, Makoto Senju shouted in a low voice. Quiet, Ichigo. Kurosaki Ichigo, who was only 9 years old, was shocked by this low shout, and then asked in confusion. How do you know my name? Makoto Senju continued to analyze, and at the same time, he had to consider the factor of Asian Sasuke's surveillance, and answered. Of course I know, your mother told me all this. What? My mother? Kurosaki Ichigo was startled, and then he noticed that Kurosaki Masaki seemed to be in a rather bad state, with closed eyes, pale face, and signs of hollowing. Mother, what's wrong with mother? Don't worry, Ichigo, I'm treating your mother. Quiet. Senju Makoto said this to comfort her, and a trace of relaxation appeared on his face. Analysis completed. However, in order to avoid the coagulation of silver blood clots, repairing Kurosaki Masaki's queency bloodline undoubtedly needs to start from the heart. However, Senju Makoto looked at Kurosaki Ichigo in front of him, who seemed to be so nervous about his mother that he ignored other things, and always felt that it was not good to continue the next step of treatment in front of Kurosaki Ichigo's face. Even if Kurosaki Ichigo didn't quite understand it now, when Kurosaki Ichigo grew up and recalled it, it was hard to say whether Tensei Zanjitsu would chop Aizen Sasuke or chop himself first. Thinking of this, Senju Makoto spoke to Kurosaki Ichigo in a gentle and kind tone, like an old father. Ichigo, turn around next and don't look here. Why? While Kurosaki Ichigo subconsciously refused, he was still trying to call Kurosaki Masaki with concern. Mother, wake up, what's wrong with you? Senju Makoto, who had no time to waste, frowned. Although he felt a little guilty about deceiving a child, he still spoke skillfully. Ichigo, believe me, your mother is also very important to me. I will definitely heal her, but the treatment process is too early for a child. Kurosaki Ichigo raised his head and looked at Senju Makoto. His eyes with tears showed half belief and half a doubt. Seeing this, Senju Makoto could only bring up that excuse again and said gently. Believe me, my last name is Kurosaki too. Even if you have any doubts, you'll slowly understand them in the future. Besides, your mother doesn't have much time left. You don't want her to get into trouble, right? The last sentence undoubtedly completely broke through Kurosaki Ichigo's psychological defenses. Please, no matter what, please save my mother. Kurosaki Ichigo kowtowed heavily to Senju Makoto, and then turned around. Senju Makoto looked at Kurosaki Ichigo with his back to him, and then slowly stretched his palm towards Kurosaki Masaki's chest again. Spirit Sun control in an instant. The Spirit Suns that were invisible to the naked eye were controlled by Senju Makoto and quickly penetrated into Kurosaki Masaki's body, and then quickly reorganized in the form of queency blood. What Senju Makoto didn't know was that while Kurosaki Ichigo turned around and kept praying for his mother in his heart, he became more and more confused about Senju Makoto's identity. He knew my name from my mother, and my mother is a very important person to him. His own last name is also Kurosaki. Suddenly, Kurosaki Ichigo thought of the TV series his mother watched every night, in which this situation seemed to have appeared. Chapter 345 Kurosaki Makoto. Faster. Faster. In the dense rain, Kurosaki Ishin ran madly in a certain direction. Although this artificial body is a special type that can fit the spirit body to the greatest extent, it is undoubtedly a huge difference compared to the ability that Shiba Ishin had when he was the captain of the 10th Division. Kurosaki Ishin's eyes were full of impatience and urgency, but for Kurosaki Ishin, who had completely lost the power of the god of death at this moment, this was undoubtedly his fastest speed. Slow, too slow. Why? Why did Kosaki's spiritual pressure suddenly disappear completely? Damn it. What happened? Thinking of this, Kurosaki Ishin couldn't suppress his impatience and wanted to shout Kurosaki Masaki's name around. When trying to get a response, his eyes looked straight ahead and his voice suddenly got stuck in his throat. I saw that in the rain ahead, Kurosaki Masaki was carried on the back of a white-haired man, and Kurosaki Ichigo was also held by his hand obediently. It was clearly in the continuous rain, but the man's gentle and indifferent temperament and steps made the scene more beautiful, like a painting. Indistinctly, it even felt like a family walking warmly in the rain. Wait! Kurosaki Ishin suddenly reacted. What family? I am Kurosaki Masaki's husband. Immediately, Kurosaki Ishin suddenly rushed towards Senju Makotao. When he was about to let Senju Makotao let go of his beautiful wife and lovely son, he suddenly found that Kurosaki Masaki's spiritual pressure seemed a little wrong, and his face was extremely pale. Although Kurosaki Ishin's appearance seemed to be less heroic than when he was the captain of the 10th Division, Shiba Ishin, but he was a little more vicissitude, but Senju Makotao still recognized this acquaintance instantly. Then, before Kurosaki Ishin could speak, Senju Makotao spoke first. Don't worry, I have already carried out emergency treatment for Masaki, and the hollowification has been successfully suppressed, but for a human body, it may take some time to recover slowly. Emergency treatment. Suppressing hollowification. Hearing these two words, Kurosaki Ishin's expression changed instantly. In the past, in order to suppress the vast old-level hollow named Hyaku that invaded Kurosaki Masaki's body, Kurosaki Ishin paid the price of establishing a spirit link with all his own Shinigami power. Although most of the Hyaku has been transferred with the birth of Kurosaki Ichigo, even the small part that remains in Kurosaki Masaki's body cannot be suppressed by ordinary means. Who is this guy in front of me? Kurosaki Ishin carefully looked at the extraordinary white-haired man in front of him, and a strong doubt flashed through his heart. Human. The face is quite unfamiliar. However, in the rain, Kurosaki Ishin also knew that it was not the place to talk, and Kurosaki Masaki and Kurosaki Ichigo were still in the rain. Immediately, under the leadership of Kurosaki Ishin, they quickly went to the Kurosaki clinic opened by their family. After returning to the Kurosaki clinic and urging Kurosaki Ichigo to quickly change into dry clothes, the 9-year-old Kurosaki Ichigo soon fell asleep unknowingly. And Senju Makotao also saw Kurosaki Ichigo's two sisters, well, two very cute twin Lolita, Kurosaki Yuko and Kurosaki Kari. It's just a little surprising that the appearance of these two twin Lolita is not very similar, and Kurosaki Yuko inherited the orange hair color of Kurosaki Masaki, while Kurosaki Kari inherited the black hair color of Kurosaki Ishin. Kurosaki Yuko timidly handed a cup of hot tea to Senju Makotao and said, "Hello, please, have some tea, thank you." Senju Makotao responded gently. It was as if Senju Makotao was born with the physique to attract Lolita. Under the influence of Senju Makotao's gentle smile, Kurosaki Yuko soon let down his guard against Senju Makotao. In the seemingly homely conversation with Kurosaki Yuko, Senju Makotao quickly learned a lot about the daily living habits of the Kurosaki family. When Kurosaki Ishin sent Kurosaki Masaki back to the room and settled her down, and after a preliminary examination confirmed that Kurosaki Masaki's condition was relatively stable, she was just in a coma, when Kurosaki Ishin returned to the living room, he was somewhat surprised to find that his two little daughters were sitting on both sides of Senju Makotao, laughing happily from time to time, and the atmosphere seemed to be extremely warm. This made Kurosaki Ishin, who had always been unpleasant in front of his daughters, feel a little jealous. This damn affinity for Lolita made Kurosaki Ishin inexplicably think of a friend he had in the Soul Society. It's just, Kurosaki Ishin sighed, and the memory of that guy's voice and smile made him feel a little sad. Then, Kurosaki Ishin regained his spirit, looked at the figures leaning against the shadow of the eaves outside the window, and said, "Yuko, Shiori, you go back to your room first. I have something to discuss with this uncle." "Yes." As the two little Liliths seemed to leave reluctantly, the atmosphere in the living room seemed to fall into dullness. Kurosaki Ishin hesitated for a moment, and then bowed solemnly to thank Senju Makoto. Your Excellency, Kurosaki Ishin is grateful for saving Koseki and Ichigo's life. Senju Makoto said with a smile. Don't worry, the reason I did this, in addition to not being able to bear to see a mother die in the mouth of a hollow, is also because there may be some connection between me and Masaki. Connection? Kurosaki Ishin asked doubtfully. Let me introduce myself, Kurosaki Makoto, a pure-blooded quincy who lost his inheritance. The reason why I came to Kurakura town is to find the inheritance of the quincy. Senju Makoto answered. Kurosaki Makoto? Pure-blooded quincy, looking for the inheritance of the quincy? This sudden information made Kurosaki Ishin obviously unable to react, but the door suddenly opened and a voice full of doubt came in. Impossible. Masaki is already the last heir of the pure-blooded quincy Kurosaki family. How can there be a pure-blooded quincy with the Kurosaki surname? Senju Makoto, who was sitting on the sofa, heard this and turned his eyes to look at the two figures that appeared at the door. The familiar man with a green fisherman's hat, short jacket, and wooden clogs, the former captain of the 12th Division Uehara Kisuke. The silver short hair with a middle part, fair skin, and wearing overalls, the pure-blooded quincy, that is, Ishidarai's father Ishidaraigen. Chapter 346 Familiar feeling. Although he knew the identity of the visitor very well, Senju Makoto still showed some doubts and asked. Who are you? Uehara Kisuke opened his small fan, covering half of his face, his eyes hidden in the brim of his hat, and answered in a rather casual and unfocused voice. I'm the manager of a nearby grocery store. I heard that something happened in the neighbor's house, so I came to join in the fun. Pure-blooded quincy, Ishidaraigen. Ishidaraigen said, and walked straight in front of Senju Makoto with big strides. His deep blue eyes revealed undisguised suspicion and said. As far as I know, there is no record of you in the Kurosaki family genealogy. It must be said that although Senju Makoto is considered a knowledgeable person in the Seireitei, his understanding of quincy is far beyond that of ordinary Shinigami. But Senju Makoto really doesn't know much about the specific family information of the quincy clan. He didn't expect that the surname Kurosaki doesn't seem to be a common thing for the quincy clan. But even so, Senju Makoto's expression still had no flaws, and he said helplessly. I don't know about this either, otherwise, I wouldn't claim to be a pure-blooded quincy who has lost its inheritance. This answer was a surefire way to block all questions about Senju Makoto's quincy inheritance. Don't ask. If you ask, you don't know, because the inheritance has been lost. At this moment, Uehara Kisuke took out a rather peculiar instrument from his arms and said. You two don't need to argue, I just brought some small props with me, which can verify the blood connection. After a pause, Uehara Kisuke narrowed his eyes and said. But I need some of your blood, is that okay? In an instant, the atmosphere in the living room seemed to be tense, and Uehara Kisuke, Ishidaraigen and Kurosaki Ishin all looked at Senju Makoto's face, as if they wanted to see panic. However, what appeared on Senju Makoto's face was a relaxed expression, and he said. Great. I was just wondering how to prove my identity. After saying that, Senju Makoto casually condensed a spirit knife like a quincy, cut his hand, and then dripped it into the instrument according to Uehara Kisuke's instructions. Seeing this, Kurosaki Ishin turned back to the room and took a few drops of Kurosaki Masaki's blood and dripped it on the other side of the instrument. Then, Uehara Kisuke began to operate this instrument that was obviously put together at the last minute. After a moment, Uehara Kisuke, who was buried in the instrument, raised his head, with a little surprise in his eyes, and said. The blood similarity of the two samples is almost over 90%, and it can almost be concluded that they are from the same clan. Upon hearing this, Ishidaraigen's face was full of shock, and he said in disbelief. What? How is this possible? The Ishida family and the Kurosaki family have been friends for generations, and I have never heard of any lost family members wandering outside. In response, Senju Makoto's mouth slightly curved. In fact, Senju Makoto is naturally impossible to be a pure-blooded quincy, let alone create a real result through the means of illusion. To be frank, Senju Makoto's understanding of Kurosaki Masaki is definitely the best in the world. Of course, this understanding is limited to the body, and Senju Makoto has not studied Kurosaki Masaki's soul in depth. Even the quincy-blooded Kurosaki Masaki's body was reconstructed by Senju Makoto himself. It is not difficult for Senju Makoto to rub out 2 drops of blood with a high degree of similarity to Kurosaki Masaki's blood on the spot. Although Seireitei still has doubts, the evidence is in front of him, plus the fact that Senju Cheng saved Kurosaki Masaki. For a moment, Kurosaki Shin became enthusiastic, and even Seireitei, who had the most blunt attitude, spoke a little more gently to his own people. Just when the atmosphere seemed to be gradually warming up, Urahara Kisuke suddenly asked, "Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, I'm sorry to ask, how did you suppress the hollow in Masaki's body?" And Urahara Kisuke stared at the changes in Senju Makoto's micro-expressions and asked, "How did Masaki still retain some of the power of a Quincy after experiencing the holy separation and being deprived of the Quincy bloodline?" Senju Makoto asked back after hearing this. "Holy separation? What is holy separation?" Urahara Kisuke glanced at Seireitei and then spoke. At the same moment in the present world, all the existing half-blood Quincies who have used the power of Quincy were deprived of their power in an instant, and are constantly sliding towards the abyss of death. Seireitei then added, saying, "And this, in the history of the Quincy, is called holy separation." "I see," Senju Makoto nodded, having understood that holy separation was probably related to Ithwatch, and then repeated the process of his treatment of Kurosaki Masaki. Of course, Senju Makoto would not really tell the specific details of the technique and the strength. Senju Makoto's explanation was that after noticing that the Quincy blood in Kurosaki Masaki's body disappeared and inexplicably began to become hollow uncontrollably, he chose to share part of his own blood with Kurosaki Masaki. "In the end, I didn't expect it to be really effective. I'm so lucky." Senju Makoto's gentle and calm words, to Seireitei's ears, were like hearing the most incredible thing in the world. "Are you kidding? You actually chose to share your bloodline with a stranger? Don't you know that this will also affect your talent and strength as a Quincy?" "Really? I really don't know much about the inheritance of Quincy. I only have this innate talent," Senju Makoto answered gently, and then changed his tone and said, "But even if I had to do it again, I would still make the same choice. Compared with the blood relatives, the loss of a little talent and strength is insignificant." After hearing this, Seireitei's seemingly cold expression could not calm down for a long time, as if he was still deeply shocked by Senju Makoto's words. It was because he was the heir of the Ishida family that Seireitei understood the great sacrifices made by Senju Makoto and the high realm he had. Then, Seireitei bowed slightly to Senju Makoto and said solemnly, "I'm sorry, I apologize for my previous rudeness. Compared with Makoto-kun, I'm undoubtedly too narrow-minded." However, when Kurosaki Shin heard these words, it felt as if he had heard them countless times at some point. Chapter 347. Changed career to archer. The next day, when Kurosaki Masaki woke up from her coma, she looked at the familiar environment around her with a confused look in her eyes. She subconsciously rubbed her chest, which seemed to be a little uncomfortable. "I'm still alive. What happened?" "Hollowed out." "Wait, soon." As Kurosaki Masaki clearly remembered the scene before she fell into a coma, the appearance of the white-haired man appeared in her mind. She suddenly rushed out of the bedroom and shouted, "Ichigo! Ichigo!" However, when Kurosaki Masaki rushed to the living room, she was somewhat surprised to find a large group of people talking and laughing. Kurosaki Shin, Kurosaki Ichigo, Kurosaki Ako, Kurosaki Kari, all of them, in addition, the gentle and handsome white-haired man and Seireitei. At this moment, Kurosaki Masaki almost thought she was hallucinating. Especially his childhood sweetheart, Seireitei, who was always serious, actually smiled and asked the white-haired man something. "Shosaki, are you awake? Come here, come here." Kurosaki Shin waved to Kurosaki Masaki in a somewhat careless manner, and then pulled Kurosaki Masaki to introduce the identity of Senju Makoto with great enthusiasm and gratitude. What pure-blooded Quincy Kurosaki Makoto, the person of the Kurosaki family who lost the inheritance. Kurosaki Shin's series of words made Kurosaki Masaki stunned for a long time and could not react. However, there was one thing that Kurosaki Masaki had already understood. The reason why he and Kurosaki Ichigo were still alive was entirely based on the kindness of Senju Makoto. Immediately, Kurosaki Masaki thanked Senju Makoto repeatedly, and said frankly that if he could do anything, he would definitely repay Senju Makoto's kindness as much as possible. After a while of humility, Kurosaki Shin seemed to have just remembered something and asked, "Shosaki, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" "Uncomfortable?" Kurosaki Masaki frowned slightly and said, "I just feel a little uncomfortable in my chest, but everything else is fine." Senju Makoto. Immediately, Senju Makoto was afraid that the little brat Kurosaki Ichigo would repeat something extraordinary, so he immediately changed the subject and said to Wishida Raijin. Raijin, this is the possible blood clot problem I just told you about. Fortunately, Mosaki's blood was replenished in time, otherwise it would be too late if the remaining blood formed a blood clot completely. Ishida Raijin nodded repeatedly, then closed the book in his hand and said, I have roughly understood it. Thank you for Makoto's advice. I will go back and try to treat my wife first. After that, Ishida Raijin hurried away with an anxious look on his face, looking at Kurosaki Mosaki with a confused look. Kurosaki Ishin explained in a low voice. Shosaki, have you forgotten? Unlike you, who was originally a pure-blooded queency infected by the hollow and became a mixed-blood queency, Raijin's wife Katajoy was originally a mixed-blood queency, and she has lost her power since yesterday and has been in a coma. In this regard, Senju Makoto could only tell Ishida Raijin as much as possible about the various effects of holy separation on mixed-blood queensies and the main causes of death. In this way, Ishida Raijin used human medicine to reduce the negative impact of holy separation as much as possible and try to save Katajoy's life. Otherwise, Senju Makoto can't nominally mix some of the Katajoy family's blood in his body and give Ishida Rai's mother a breath of blood, right? Although Kurosaki Ishin and Kurosaki Mosaki were also quite worried about Katajoy's condition, they still warmly entertained Senju Makoto, the benefactor. Moreover, after learning that Makoto Senju came to Karakura town to look for his clan members and the inheritance related to the queency, Kurosaki Mosaki almost handed over the Kurosaki family inheritance without reservation. For this reason, Kurosaki Mosaki even put aside the usual task of picking up Ichigo Kurosaki from school, and whenever he had time, he would take Makoto Senju to the small woods on the mountain, teaching him various queency inheritance skills by words and deeds. In this regard, Ishin Kurosaki was quite relieved, without the slightest concern or worry, and even often packed meals and personally delivered them to Makoto Senju and Mosaki Kurosaki to replenish their physical strength. After all, in Ishin Kurosaki's view, Makoto Senju and Mosaki Kurosaki were clan members with close blood. Makoto Senju also showed the talent of the queency that was completely incredible in the eyes of Mosaki Kurosaki. Makoto Senju could completely master almost all the queency combat skills and auxiliary skills after just one look. This bloodliner is too pure. Kurosaki Mosaki admired it in his heart countless times. Although Kurosaki Mosaki is also a very talented queency, he was able to fight against vast old-level hollows when he was only a little over 10 years old. However, compared with Senju Makoto, Kurosaki Mosaki felt eclipsed. However, what Kurosaki Mosaki didn't know was that for Senju Makoto, as long as it involved the scope of spirit particles, there was almost no possibility that Senju Makoto would have difficulty mastering it. Coincidentally, the queency's fighting method was almost all centered around the absorption and manipulation of external spirit particles. Therefore, for Senju Makoto, he only needed to understand various ways of absorption and manipulation, and then he would naturally master the corresponding queency fighting skills. Among them, the queency's movement technique Flying Kick made Senju Makoto's eyes light up the most. The Shinigami's movement technique Instant Step is essentially a step that combines the strength of the spirit body and the burst of spiritual pressure, so that the Shinigami can achieve various high-speed movements and turns in battle. The essence of the queency's flying leg is still a way to manipulate the spirit particles, so that the spirit particles carry the human body to move and turn at high speed. It is difficult to tell the difference between the two, but for Makoto Senju, Flying Leg has undoubtedly become the best choice to replace Instant Step. Although Makoto Senju's Instant Step level is no less than that of ordinary Captain-level Shinigami, but Makoto Senju knows that it is difficult for his Instant Step talent to reach the level of Instant God Shifu Yuan or Ishi. However, the ability of spiritual particle control allows Makoto Senju to reach the real theoretical limit of the height of Flying Leg. For a time, Makoto Senju, who originally just wanted to live in the world temporarily in order to disguise his identity more perfectly, and then change his job to archer, became completely interested in Flying Leg. Even after one of Makoto Senju's attempts, he suddenly discovered that for him, it seemed that Instant Step and Flying Leg were completely skills that could be used at the same time. It's just too fast. Senju Makoto, who tried it for the first time, felt that he couldn't even stop the car. However, there is a bright future. Senju Makoto has vaguely seen his future of becoming the fastest man in the world. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 348. Instrument Doll. Unlike in the Seireitei, life in the real world is undoubtedly more peaceful. There are no frequent battles like in the Seireitei. Although there are hollows appearing from time to time, most of them are just newly formed hollows and some hollows that cannot survive in the Mundo and come to the real world to devour human souls. In addition, the Shinigami who were responsible for the daily purification of hollows in the real world called Kurakusa Town are quite conscientious, so Senju Cheng sometimes even feels like he has returned to the peaceful life of his previous life. Of course, Senju Cheng is also very clear that it is just an illusion. Agent Sussex's surveillance centered on Kurosaki Ichigo from time to time, and you watch his holy separation that seems to be completely undiscovered by the Seireitei. In addition, Hyoshuka Ichigo, who is hidden in the lofty Soul King Palace, makes Senju Cheng understand that the crisis has always existed and may even break out at any time. Therefore, although Senju, as the controller of spiritual particles, theoretically has the same height as Hyoshuka Ichigo, Senju knows very well, it is not enough. From the very beginning of appearing in this world, Senju has made it very clear, power can be used, but it cannot be without instrument. Senju stood in a mountain forest near Kurakura town, with his eyes closed, but the clothes on his body seemed to be constantly changing as if controlled by a pair of big hands. After a long time, Senju couldn't help but open his eyes with some disappointment. During this period of time in the real world, in addition to mastering a lot of Queency fighting skills through Kurosaki Musaki, Senju's focus is undoubtedly more on the study of instrument. Bankai all things edict is not limited to spirit particles, but instrument is also one of the things. Only name and instrument cannot be handed over to others. Senju will naturally not ignore these important information. However, in addition to absorbing and fusing the devices at a slow speed, Senju Cheng's ultimate spirit allows Senju Cheng to control the devices that have been fused. However, no matter how Senju Cheng tries, he can never manipulate the devices in the outside world. In this way, it seems that these changes do not seem to have much meaning to Senju Cheng at all. In the past month, with the number of devices that have been slowly absorbed and fused, in addition to allowing Senju Cheng to disguise his human appearance, the remaining parts have to shrink even to make a solid proportional inflatable doll, let alone use it in battle. It's impossible for Senju Cheng to suddenly take out a REM version of the inflatable doll from his crotch and throw it to kill them when he is fighting against Agent Sussex's and Hyoshuka Ichigo, right? However, it feels really good, almost no different from humans. Senju Cheng's palm carefully pinched the REM version of the proportional doll that he had just rubbed out in front of him, and couldn't help but sigh at some of the wonders of the device. The only regret is that this inflatable doll is essentially not much different from a prosthetic body. Even if Senju Cheng squeezed it out, it would not move by itself, and there was no color in its lifeless eyes. In other words, lack of soul. Therefore, Senju Cheng's current way to improve his combat power, in addition to the level of kendo and the extreme speed of the combination of Failing Jiao and Instant Step, can only hope that the extreme spirit body will absorb the number of instruments to a certain extent and there will be no changes. And this also made Senju Cheng understand that he might need to stay in the world for a long time. Suddenly, Senju Cheng slowly spoke to the air behind him. Synopsis, how is it going? As Senju Cheng's voice fell, the air seemed to ripple like the surface of a lake, and a strange barrier composed of spirit particles spread out to reveal Synopsis' appearance that was very different from a human boy. Master Senju, I have found a hollow with the ability to modify memory, and modified the memory of some humans according to your request. Well done, Senju Cheng nodded and praised, which made Snop's face almost involuntarily reveal a satisfied expression. The so-called memory modification is naturally Senju Cheng's way of avoiding flaws. Unlike the Rukongei in Soul Society, the real world undoubtedly has a relatively strict identity information management system, and everyone will leave a lot of records from birth to death. For these things, Senju Cheng, who retains the memory of his previous life, will naturally not ignore them. Perhaps, after the verification of the bloodline of the Kurosaki family, Kurosaki Ishin, Kurosaki Musaki and Ishida Raijin have no doubt about Senju Cheng's identity. However, Senju Cheng knows very well that Urahara Kisuke, who seems to be a little out of tune throughout the whole process, will never believe him so easily. At the time, as long as Urahara Kisuke asks Senju Makoto about the past, and then confirms it with the corresponding traces in the real world, a lot of flaws will appear. That is why Makoto Senju is so diligent in going to the grove with Kurosaki Masaki to change his job to an archer and study archery. It might be to take the opportunity to hide from Urahara Kisuke. In addition, the whole separation incident happened to attract Urahara Kisuke's attention, which made Makoto Senju not see Urahara Kisuke again during this period. This also gave Makoto Senju the opportunity to secretly order Synopsis to improve his past life trajectory and information. There is no need for too much detail, as long as there are traces of the remaining part from small to large, and a delicate record of how to arrive at Karakura town recently. Obviously, for Synopsis, the Hollow King who once controlled the Great Hollow Forest, it is not difficult to find a few hollows with special abilities to forge traces. Makoto Senju thought about it and asked, Synopsis, are you interested in becoming a human, so that you don't need to hide in the spirit particle barrier all the time? Can I? Synopsis asked excitedly with his eyes wide open. Of course, it's probably the same as the god of death wearing a prosthetic body, and you don't have to worry about others discovering your identity as an Arensei. Senju Makoto explained roughly. If I can always follow Senju's map, it will undoubtedly be the ultimate honor for Synopsis. Synopsis answered excitedly. In this case, then I will make a doll based on your appearance after you become an Arensei for you to live in, Senju Makoto said while picking up the REM version of the life-size doll. When he was about to modify the appearance and give it to Synopsis, Synopsis hesitated for a long time and whispered, Senju's map, Can I just use the appearance of the doll in your hand? Chapter 349. Female Shorter. Senju Makoto. Even Senju Makoto didn't react, and subconsciously made a strange sound. Then, Senju Makoto looked at the REM version of the doll in his hand, and then looked at the harmless little boy Synopsis in front of him, and asked, Why? At this moment, Senju Makoto almost instinctively came up with several guesses in his mind. For example, just like Kachikabyokaya has no resistance to Onion heads, Synopsis also has no resistance to REM. Or as a little boy, Synopsis may have the idea of becoming a girl in his heart, and Synopsis hesitated for a long time, hesitating. Because it seems that Senju's map seems to like that look more, so I want to become the shape that Senju's map likes. Senju Makoto. The corners of Senju Makoto's mouth twitched, and he almost couldn't help but throw REM in his hand. This kind of conversation, is there something wrong? There should be something wrong, right? Is there something wrong? Is this loyalty a little too hot? Is it even prone to corruption? However, when Senju Cheng looked at Synopsis' eyes full of admiration, he deeply understood that Synopsis, who was promoted to Vastod with faith as his obsession, seemed to really regard himself as the supreme faith. Towards what you believe, offer everything. Towards what you believe, change yourself. Towards what you believe, move forward. Perhaps, this is what Synopsis thinks. Because Synopsis doesn't care about his specific image in the world, he just wants to make his image easier to be accepted by Senju Cheng. Understanding the awareness of Synopsis, Senju Cheng looked at Synopsis' hesitant expression, handed the REM-shaped doll in his hand to Synopsis, and said, Since it is your request, then you were allowed to use this appearance. Yes, Master Senju. Synopsis said, and then he could not wait to use the doll in front of him according to the instructions of Makoto Senju. Under Makoto Senju's gaze, the REM doll in front of him, whose eyes seemed to have no color at all, gradually glowed as Synopsis' consciousness took control of the body, and the eyes looking at Makoto Senju were full of admiration. In addition, the unique appearance of the REM doll immediately gave Makoto Senju a wonderful feeling, and even made Makoto Senju a little regretful that he could not make a thunder general due to the limited number of instruments. And Synopsis looked at Makoto Senju's seemingly strange eyes, and pressed the maid dress skirt a little unaccustomedly, and asked carefully, How is it? Master Senju. Makoto Senju coughed lightly, and said with a slight sideways turn, Call me Master. Synopsis blinked, somewhat confused, but his body responded first. Master. At this moment, Senju Makoto almost had the illusion that he really had a real REM maid. However, Senju Makoto's reason told him, strictly speaking, it was just a female dressed shorter. Ahem. Senju Makoto turned and walked out of the woods, saying, It's barely okay. I'll find you some maid books later. You should study hard and not expose your habits and identity as a hollow in front of humans. Synopsis hurriedly followed Senju Makoto and responded with full of energy. Yes, Master. In order to better adapt to life in the real world, Senju Cheng also rented a shop not far from the Kurosaki clinic through Kurosaki Ishin's relationship during this period, preparing to open a flower shop. After all, during this period of time, Senju Cheng has been living in the Kurosaki family under the hospitality of Kurosaki Ishin and Kurosaki Masaki. However, Senju couldn't always live in the Kurosaki family, so he was prepared to settle down in Kurakura town in this way, and occasionally observe Ichigo Kurosaki up close to confirm his value. As for Synopsis, Senju's original intention was to place him as a free labor clerk. Now, although Synopsis has become a female dressing shopper, it will not affect the nature of Synopsis's work at all. There was no grand opening ceremony. A flower shop that looked warm and inconspicuous simply started its formal business, and Senju also officially moved out of the Kurosaki family. A bunch of fresh Dixia was placed in the vase closest to him by Senju, and then he leisurely handled the flowers in his hands to arrange the flowers in the fragrance of the Dixia flowers. This scene was as beautiful as a painting in the eyes of Masaki Kurosaki, who had just entered the door. "Madam, do you need to buy flowers?" It was not until Synopsis's somewhat cold voice sounded that Kurosaki Masaki came back to her senses from her trance and asked, "Who are you?" Synopsis remembered the words in the clerk manual issued by Senju Cheng, and answered with a strong disdain for humans in her heart. "Clerk Rem, at your service." Only then did Kurosaki Masaki carefully look at Synopsis, and then praised with a smile on her face. "So cute, Cheng has a good eye, and he actually invited such a cute clerk. I'm sure it will attract many people to buy flowers." After a pause, Kurosaki Masaki explained, "I'm a friend of your boss, and I came to see him for something." Synopsis nodded, saluted sideways with impeccable maid etiquette, and made way, saying, "I see, please." Then, Kurosaki Masaki pushed Kurosaki Ichigo, who was holding her hand, in front of Synopsis and said, "Ichigo, stay with this lovely little sister first. I'll go talk to your uncle Cheng. Be good and obedient." Compared with his personality after adulthood, Ichigo Kurosaki's personality in childhood was a little timid and responded, "Yes, mother." Then, Kurosaki Masaki handed Ichigo Kurosaki to Synopsis with great confidence and walked towards Senju Cheng. As Kurosaki Masaki left, Ichigo Kurosaki lowered his head timidly, but from time to time he seemed to be unable to help but secretly glance at Synopsis. However, perhaps Synopsis was very well behaved in front of Senju Cheng, but it was obviously not the case with outsiders. Facing Ichigo Kurosaki's behavior of peeking from time to time, Synopsis spoke in a cold tone. "Something. If you need to go to the bathroom, I can take you there, but you need to take off your pants and do it yourself. If you have eye problems, turn right and there is a Kurosaki clinic suitable for treatment." "No, no, no." Kurosaki Ichigo waved his hands to deny it, then blushed and whispered, "I just think Rem's sister is so cute. P.S. I was delayed tonight by something, so I took a short leave and only updated twice. I will add more updates a few days later to make up for it. That's all." Chapter 350 Gift. Facing Ichigo Kurosaki's praise, Synopsis tilted his head, thought for a moment, and commented, "Are you trying to sexually harass me? Pervert." "Ah." In an instant, Ichigo Kurosaki's face almost completely flushed, and he waved his hands repeatedly and stammered, "No, no, I'm not." "No need to explain. Judging by human behavior, you should be trying to sexually harass me, a typical courtship behavior." Synopsis, who had no idea of judging age based on appearance, said in a cold tone. At this moment, Ichigo Kurosaki was shy and agitated. It was like a young boy who had just begun to fall in love, and was suddenly drenched by Synopsis's yawning, which completely confused Ichigo Kurosaki. After a long while, Ichigo Kurosaki, with a red face, stammered and apologized. "Yes, I'm sorry, no need to apologize, guests." Synopsis, who abided by the clerk manual and the maid regulations, said in a cold tone, but returned the greeting in an elegant and cute manner. "On the contrary, if there is anything I can do to help the guests, please let me know." As a pure little boy, Ichigo Kurosaki had almost no resistance to the charm of the Rem doll's appearance at close range. No, thank you, Sister Rem." Ichigo Kurosaki stammered. At this time, the door of the flower shop was pushed open again, and Raijin Ishida pushed a young woman in a wheelchair in. Immediately, Synopsis left Ichigo Kurosaki and went to greet them. "Two guests, do you need to buy flowers?" Makoto Senju, who had already communicated with Masaki Kurosaki, came over a little late and said, "Rem, you go and do your work, I will personally receive these guests." After that, Makoto Senju looked at Raijin Ishida, and then his eyes were on the beautiful young woman sitting in the wheelchair, and asked, "Raijin, who is this?" "This is my wife, Hikata-ji." Thanks to Makoto's advice, after 7 operations to remove blood clots, he lost all her queency abilities and her lower body was paralyzed, but she was lucky enough to survive. Ishida Raijin said with gratitude on his face. Hikata-ji, who was sitting in a wheelchair, bowed slightly to apologize to Senju Makoto. It must be said that Hikata-ji's appearance and temperament in some aspects are quite similar to his Nanao, but her face looks a little pale as if she had just recovered from a serious illness. In addition, Hikata-ji's black clothes highlight her sickly and noble beauty. Senju Makoto hurriedly supported Hikata-ji and said, "Don't be so polite. As a fellow queency, I am very satisfied to be able to help." "No, Makoto's kindness is very important to the Ishida family." After a pause, Ishida Raijin took out a gift box and handed it to Senju Makoto, saying, "I just heard that Makoto's flower shop is opening today. This is a gift. Please don't refuse it." Makoto Senju took it and felt that it was quite heavy. He asked subconsciously, "Gift, what is it?" "Some secrets and inherited skills recorded by the Ishida family." After a pause, Ishida Raijin lowered his voice and said in Makoto Senju's ear, "Among them, especially some information about holy separation and the legendary king of Queency Thwaj. These are all secrets of the Queency. Makoto, be careful not to leak them out." Makoto Senju's expression moved, and he immediately realized how precious this gift was. "You know, even the Great Spirit Book Corridor in Soul Society doesn't have many records about Thwaj. These secrets that come from the Ishida family have been recording, and they may solve many of Makoto Senju's doubts." As for Ishida Raijin's reminder about leaking, after a little thought, Makoto Senju realized that Ishida Raijin was guarding against the 2 Shinigami, Kurosaki Ishin and Urahara Kisuke. Although Ishida Raijin has a decent personal relationship with Kurosaki Ishin and Urahara Kisuke, the opposing positions between the Shinigami and the Queensies undoubtedly make Ishida Raijin have reservations about them in some aspects. On this point, Senju Makoto unexpectedly agrees with Ishida Raijin. However, it is not just about the matter of Thwaj. The most important thing for Senju Makoto is the biggest threat, Hyoshogu Ichibei. You know, the 0 division controlled by Hyoshogu Ichibei is nominally above the Gotti 13 division, and in a sense, Hyoshogu Ichibei is almost the spokesperson for the Soul King to the outside world, which makes Senju Makoto have to be a little wary of Urahara Kisuke. Perhaps in the face of Aizen Sasuke, Urahara Kisuke will firmly stand on the same side of Senju Makoto, but once Hyoshogu Ichibei swings his sword at Senju Makoto, it is quite suspicious what position Urahara Kisuke will choose. At this moment, the door of the flower shop was opened again, and Urahara Kisuke's seemingly carefree figure happened to walk in and gestured to Senju Makoto. "I heard that Mr. Kurosaki Makoto's flower shop opened, so I came to congratulate him. We should take care of each other in the future." Seeing this, Senju Makoto immediately went up to him and said, "Welcome Manager Urahara." However, before Senju Makoto finished speaking, a black cat suddenly jumped out from behind Urahara Kisuke and pounced on Senju Makoto's face. As if it had a stress reaction, it quickly scratched Senju Makoto's face a few times. Suddenly, Senju Makoto's face had a few more cat claw marks. Seeing this, Urahara Kisuke hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed the black cat in a panic, and then apologized to Senju Makoto repeatedly. Sorry, didn't scare you. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, my cat is sometimes too wild and lacks some discipline. I will scold her when I go back." "It's okay," Senju Makoto wiped the faint cat claw marks on his face as if he didn't care, and said with a gentle smile. "But this cat is too wild, it needs to be disciplined." Of course, Urahara Kisuke said as he quickly handed over the gift he had prepared and expressed his apologies again. This incident seemed like an insignificant episode and was soon ignored by everyone in the harmonious conversation. Kurosaki Masaki, Ishida Raijin and Urahara Kisuke, who came to congratulate the opening, bought a bouquet of flowers when they left, and became the first customers of Senju Makoto to patronize the flower shop before leaving. Watching their backs as they left, Senju Makoto reached out and touched the bloodstain on his face, and said with a smile on his lips, "You are really wild and naughty, Captain Yorishi." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like, Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.